Chapter 732. In the dimly lit lobby of the hotel, Tan Xiao stood in the center with his eyes locked on the hotel's entrance. The moment two middle-aged men in black leather jackets with grim expressions entered the door, the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad had already aimed their guns at them. Tan Xiao, Divine Dr. Tang. The yellow-haired middle-aged man in leather jackets on the left directly ignored the muzzles of the Phantom Special Combat Squad and stopped 7 or 8 meters away from Tan Xiao. "Tell me your background," said Tan Xiao indifferently. "You don't need to know our identity for the time being. You just need to know one thing. Tell your trash men to put down their guns and come with us alone. You'll naturally know who we are when we get there." "Preposterous, self-righteous fool," Tan Xiao sneered. "Don't tell me you don't know that running amok in our country's territory is a violation of our country's laws? The law is bullshit in front of us," said the middle-aged man with a gloomy face. "I hope Mr. Tang will speak politely. The fact that we can find you in time shows our ability. We've already given you enough face by inviting you with courtesy. There's an old saying in your country that you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. I hope Mr. Tang won't make the same decision as this saying." "Are you threatening me?" asked Tan Xiao. "Since the soft approach doesn't work, we can only use the hard way," said the middle-aged man coldly. "But before that, I ask Mr. Tang to seize the last chance and come with us." Yu Shuqing pointed the muzzle at the yellow-haired middle-aged man's temple. He vigilantly approached the yellow-haired middle-aged man and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Tang won't go with you. You must consider the consequences before you act." The middle-aged man turned his head and observed Yu Shuqing. He then nodded and said, "No wonder Mr. Tang is so fearless. It turns out that you have experts protecting you. If I'm not mistaken, these should be the special soldiers of the Chinese military, right? Since we're going to use force, why don't we have some appetizers first? Let's have a spar, shall we?" After saying that, he clapped his hands. And immediately 8 men in suits with sabers on their backs flashed in from outside the door. They exuded a cold aura and quickly stood in a row behind the thin middle-aged man. Yu Shuqing vaguely felt that these people were not ordinary. After pondering for a moment, he took a step back and said in a deep voice, "Gangzi, come and play with them." The Phantom Special Combat Squad's Wei Qinggang, whose fighting level was second only to Yu Shuqing, handed the gun in his hand to Emo Xiaonan beside him. He then quickly removed the other equipment on his body and twisted his neck. With a cracking sound, he took a few steps forward and sneered, "Who wants to play?" The thin middle-aged man sneered and raised his right hand to hook his finger forward. A man on the far left of the row took a few steps forward and came in front of Wei Qinggang. He then spoke in English, "I'm the weakest in my squad, but it's not a problem for me to deal with you. Come, let me see the strength of China's special forces." Wei Qinggang assumed a fighting stance and sneered, "Don't bite your tongue when you're boasting. Bring it on." Tan Xiao secretly shook his head. The hidden experts of the Stygian Club were absolutely innumerable. The assassins he encountered in Laozhan Mountain in Changshi City were all heterogeneous with terrifying strength. But the thin middle-aged man in front of him and the guy next to him were not human. Their strength was very likely very strong. As for the 8 men of the thin middle-aged man, each of them had a strong smell of blood on them. Their killing intent surged and released a strong murderous aura, proving that they were very strong. At the very least, they were battle-hardened experts. Wei Qinggang? He's probably not that guy's match. However, Tan Xiao didn't intend to remind Wei Qinggang since he didn't have a good impression of these guys from the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Especially at this moment, he didn't even open his mouth, yet Yu Shuqing, the captain, jumped out and made his men fight with the opponent. This was simply stupid. At the same time, Tan Xiao also had another purpose. It would be best if all the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were injured. That way, they wouldn't have to follow him like a tail and wouldn't affect his actions on Miss Source Island. At this time, Wei Qinggang was full of confidence. He had won the championship in fighting in 2 consecutive military region tournaments. Even though he attached great importance to the enemy, he still unconsciously believed that the opponent couldn't beat him. Seeing that the opponent didn't take the initiative to attack, he was too lazy to be modest. His footsteps instantly sprinted and fiercely kicked the opponent. If an ordinary person was hit by his kick, they would be seriously injured even if they didn't die. Too slow. The man shook his head and muttered to himself. He grabbed Wei Qinggong's ankle with lightning speed and kicked the inner thigh of Wei Qinggong's other leg. In the blink of an eye, he punched Wei Qinggong's face with his other fist. Bam! Wei Qinggong, who was full of confidence, was sent flying by the opponent's punch. He was dizzy and fell under the wall at the side. Had it not been for his strong resistance, he would have been knocked out by the opponent's heavy punch. One move. The winner was directly decided. The man, with a disdainful expression, spat at the place where Wei Qinggong fell. He didn't pursue the victory, nor did he kill him. With disdain, he returned behind the thin middle-aged man, put his hands behind his back again, and no longer looked at Wei Qinggong. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were dumbfounded. They looked at the man who defeated Wei Qinggong as if they were looking at a monster. They knew each other well and naturally knew how strong Wei Qinggong's fighting strength was. But they couldn't figure out why Wei Qinggong was defeated by the opponent in just one move. Yu Shuqing's heart was violently shaken. The other members of the Phantom Special Combat Squadron did not clearly see the enemy's attack route. They only felt that the opponent's speed was very fast and his strength was sufficient. However, he clearly captured the opponent's attack route and judged the opponent's terrifying speed. So fast. So strong. No one in the entire Phantom Special Combat Squad is his opponent. Even if I burst out with my strongest attack, I'm afraid I can't defeat that guy. Whether it's strength or speed, the opponent is too strong. Yu Shuqing looked at Tan Xiu with shame. He began to secretly regret that he shouldn't have jumped out prematurely to protect Tan Xiu. Only at this moment did he realize that Tan Xiu had never uttered a word since the moment he stood up. He didn't say a word, nor did he express any attitude. Tan Xiu glanced at Yu Shuqing's expression and completely grasped his mentality. After a moment of silence, Tan Xiu lightly said, "Victory and defeat are common in the military. This failure doesn't mean that we will fail again and again in the future. As long as our ambition remains undiminished and we continue to work hard in the future, I believe that the day of victory will come sooner or later. But since I'm the person in charge of Miss Source Island, no one can jump out and ask for a snub without my order in the future." "I understand." Yu Shuqing nodded bitterly. Tan Xiu shifted to the thin middle-aged man and lightly said, "Since you want to fight first, then I'll accompany you to the end. Shui Sha, come out and play with him." Shui Sha flashed out from the corner of the corridor and instantly appeared at Tan Xiu's side. He cupped his fists and walked to the middle of the two parties, grinning hideously and said, "I always felt that fighting and killing was very boring. I didn't expect to meet so many experts today. It seems that we'll have some fun. Hey brat, come out and let's have a fight." The thin middle-aged man hooked his finger at his subordinate and indifferently said, "It's not the last moment yet, so there's no need to turn hostile and kill. However, don't be too lenient. It's fine if you don't die, but you must be seriously injured." "Got it," replied the man. He glanced at Shui Sha contemptuously and instantly dashed forward. In nearly the blink of an eye, he had already dashed to the front of Shui Sha. He suddenly slapped his palm and instantly attacked Shui Sha's face. "You're too slow." Shui Sha sneered and his figure instantly turned into an afterimage. Before the man could react, his palm had already penetrated Shui Sha's phantom. Just as the man's determined strike failed, his expression slightly changed and he was about to launch a second round of attacks, but he was directly slapped to the ground by a pair of palms that he couldn't see clearly. Then, Shui Sha kicked the man's abdomen with a seemingly light and floaty kick at the man's waist while his body was moving on the ground. One move. It was the same move, yet Shui Sha had severely injured the man. The man's body was pushed back 7 to 8 meters on the ground and eventually hit the wall. Blood flowed from his head and he directly fainted. What? The thin middle-aged man and his other companion's complexion turned extremely ugly, as though they had eaten a dead fly from their meal. They were nearly angered to death. However, they also realized Shui Sha's terrifying power at this moment. The Phantom Special Combat Squad. Mo Xiaonan stared blankly at the enemy who was defeated by Shui Sha in one move. He then looked at Wei Qinggang, who had already stood up while trembling. He suddenly touched Chen Yongfan with his arm and said in a low voice, "Tell me I'm dreaming." "It's not a dream." Chen Yongfan tightly clenched his fists. His eyes were full of fanaticism as he fixedly stared at Shueisha. The others, however, looked incredulous with lofty respect faintly mixed in their eyes. They didn't expect that one of Tan Xiu's men could casually stand up and defeat the enemy. Mo Xiaonan pinched his thigh and muttered with a trembling voice, "Just now, Gangzi was defeated by someone in one move." But the one who defeated Gangzi in one move was actually defeated by one of Tan Xiu's men. What does this mean? If Tan Xiu's man wants to deal with Gangzi, I'm afraid it won't be much more difficult than crushing an ant. Shueisha looked at his unconscious opponent with some regret. He then turned to look at Tan Xiu and smilingly said, "Boss, since they want to pick a fight with us, it's better for me to clean them up first. Else, it'll be very annoying if they keep surrounding us like flies." Chapter 733. A smile outlined on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth. How could he not understand the hidden meaning in Shueisha's words? It was necessary to deal with these guys in front of him, but the most important thing was to make the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad leave. Otherwise, once those non-humans from the Stygian Club appeared, they would definitely expose their identity as cultivators. "Shueisha, if they have the guts, then you can exercise your muscles." Shueisha nodded with a smile. Then he looked at the Stygian Club's people and proudly said, "My boss said that you flies are very annoying. If you want to show off your strength, then clamp your balls in your crotch and come out. I'll fight all of you alone." The thin middle-aged man's face was gloomy as he fiercely stared at Shueisha. He had the bloodline of a werewolf, so he naturally had great strength. Aside from the experts of his clan around him, the rest of his 7 subordinates were all humans. Although they also practiced strange cultivation techniques, their strength was not particularly strong. It wouldn't be a problem for them to deal with ordinary humans, but they could only be beaten up once they encountered a real alien race powerhouse. However, he had his own pride, and he would never allow his subordinates to be cowards. Although this guy named Shueisha was very strong, it wasn't impossible for his 7 subordinates to fight him if they joined forces. "Go, kill him!" The thin middle-aged man clenched his fists and shouted. The 7 experts from the Stygian Club were shocked upon hearing his order. The moment they heard Shueisha's words, their hearts were filled with killing intent and they couldn't wait to get the order to kill him. Whoosh! The 7 men stepped forward and instantly pulled out the sabers tied to their backs from the scabbards. Their neat movements and chilling blades filled the air with an austere aura. Shueisha slightly frowned. Despite being bold and skillful, he was still vigilant. The Everlasting Feast Hall had a unique battle array that could unleash a formidable power as long as many people cooperated with it. However, these 7 people in front of him had a tacit understanding and were likely to know how to combine such an array. 7 stars alignment. The 7 people's footsteps suddenly moved. As the sound that came out from the gaps between their teeth faded away, the 7 people turned into afterimages and instantly enveloped Shueisha. Their speed was originally not very fast, but they cooperated with each other. Their sabers constantly collided and their palms slapped their companions' shoulders in the same order and direction, causing their speed to soar a lot. "You need companions to help you?" Shueisha raised his eyebrows and his dignified expression suddenly changed. A smile appeared in his mind as he instantly threw a dart and accurately hit one of the sabers. It was also at this moment that a gap appeared in the battle formation that borrowed force to accelerate. "Break for me!" Like a shadow, Shueisha swept the dagger in his hand along the gaps in the battle formation. With the force of a small force, 2 sabers were bounced off. The dagger in Shueisha's hand seemed to have a life of its own as it stabbed into the left rib of one of the men in a tricky and strange path. Ah! Just as the shrill screams were heard, 2 lines of blood appeared on the necks of 2 of them. Along with the opening of their necks, blood spurted wildly. Shueisha was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. The dagger in his hand kept flying, leaving bloody shadows behind. He was suppressing his speed, yet he was still nearly twice as fast as the people from the Stygian Club. When experts exchanged blows, The advantage of nearly double the speed was definitely a one-sided massacre. 15 seconds. It only took Xue Sha 15 seconds to return to Tan Xiu after throwing the dart, completely ending the battle. Bam, 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 bam. 7 bodies fell to the ground, convulsing for more than 10 seconds while blood splashed everywhere, and then completely lost their vitality. The thin middle-aged man clenched his fists so hard that they turned white. His eyes flashed with crazy killing intent. A surging aura emanated from him as he stared at Xue Sha, as though he would attack at any time. How could this be? That was what he thought. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that of the 8 subordinates he had personally trained, 7 had died and 1 was injured in such a short period of time. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were equally dumbfounded. The moment the 7 Stygian club members formed their battle formation, they had already realized the strength of the other party. Yet, the 7 of them were unexpectedly killed by Xue Sha in such a short time. Such strength and means were definitely much stronger than theirs. Is he still human? Chen Yangfan's mouth twitched a few times as he couldn't help but murmur in a low voice. Suddenly, he recalled the time when he was in Demonic City. The guy who put a dagger on his neck like a ghost. Could it be them? Chen Yangfan's pupils instantly shrunk and his eyes quickly landed on Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu came from China and set off together from Demonic City. That guy who was as fast as lightning was also in Demonic City at that time. There was definitely a close connection between the two. Having figured it out, Chen Yangfan immediately came to Yu Shuqing's side and whispered, "It's them, Captain." Chen Yangfan's words made Yu Shuqing stare blankly and confused. "What do you mean? Do you still remember when I was tracking mouse and someone put a dagger on my neck?" Chen Yangfan said in a low voice. "I suspect that person was Tan Xiu's man. You've also seen this Xue Sha guy's speed. He's too fast." Yu Shuqing's expression slightly changed. After carefully thinking about it, he felt that Chen Yangfan's conjecture was very reasonable. There were a lot of coincidences in it, and if they were to be connected, it should be them. But then why did Tan Xiu look for mouse? Did he also want to buy intel? Put this matter aside for now. Yu Shuqing could sense that the thin middle-aged man was about to erupt, so he immediately raised his gun and spoke in a low voice. Tan Xiu glanced at the thin middle-aged man with a faint smile and looked satisfied. He then nodded to Xue Sha and said, "Well done. Your strength has improved, hasn't it?" "It's a small breakthrough," said Xue Sha with a smile. "All right, you don't need to do anything for the rest." Tan Xiu nodded. If these two want to do it themselves, there will be someone to play with them. The thin middle-aged man took a deep breath and directly suppressed his killing intent. Then, he said in a deep voice, "We'll give you one last chance now, Tan Xiu. If you agree to go with us, some of your men will die. But don't blame us for being ruthless if you still insist on going your own way." Tan Xiu, am afraid of anything but threats." Tan Xiu laughed. "Bring it on if you have the ability. But once you expose something that shouldn't be exposed in front of ordinary people, I'm afraid this matter will quickly spread out. It'll be very difficult for you to clean up the mess by then. No one will know if ordinary people die," said the thin middle-aged man with a murderous aura. As his voice faded away, the middle-aged man beside him instantly pounced towards the 7 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Before he could reach Yu Shuqing, who was at the forefront, his wolf teeth were exposed, and his eyes had already turned green. Even on his originally dark skin, strands of hair continuously drilled out, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, he turned into a humanoid beast. Wolf. Stimulating one's bloodline could temporarily cause one's strength to double. Tang Xiu had seen a werewolf in Mount Lao who had stimulated his bloodline to return to its ancestral state, so he didn't feel anything strange about it. The 7 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, however, were shocked by the werewolf's transformation. At this moment, except for Yu Shuqing, who could still pull the trigger and shoot subconsciously, the rest were all dumbfounded. Mo Ao's burly figure instantly dashed forward and unleashed his immortal sword. The moment the werewolf's sharp claws were about to tear Yu Shuqing's head, he fiercely slashed the sharp claws. As blood splashed on Yu Shuqing's face, the werewolf's other sharp claws swept 4 bloody wounds on Yu Shuqing's chest. Roar! The skinny middle-aged man's body also changed. As the clothes on his back were torn apart, 2 wings instantly spread out, and a dark red feather crown grew on his forehead. Flames instantly shot out from his eyes. At the same time, the feathers on the 2 wings shot out one by one, covering the sky and shooting toward Tan Xiao and Shueisha. The flames touched the feathers and formed a fire arrow. Even the surrounding temperature suddenly soared at this moment. Bush, bush, bush. 8 figures instantly appeared in front of Tan Xiao. Together with Shueisha, they unleashed their flying swords. When the sky was filled with layers of sword shadows, the fire arrows were instantly smashed. The swift and fierce sword chi formed a sword net, pouncing toward the thin middle-aged man who had transformed into a winged man, a cultivator from Huaxia. The winged man's complexion changed dramatically. As if he had realized something, his figure instantly retreated. When he appeared behind Imo, his wings turned into light blades and fiercely swept toward the back of Imo Ao's neck. "You're courting death." Imo Ao's cultivation was the highest among them except for Tan Xiao. Feeling the wind coming from behind him, he instantly rushed toward the werewolf. The flying swords rotated and strangled the werewolf, forcing him to retreat to the middle of Yu Shuqing and the others. Tut, tut, tut. The muzzles of the 7 guns spat out fire snakes. The bullets were fired as if they were free, and most of the bullets shot into the werewolf's body. Roar! The winged man suddenly roared and grabbed a syringe from his waist. The moment he fiercely smashed it toward Moo, the 2 pairs of wings instantly disappeared without a trace, and the silver-red feather crown on his forehead directly dissipated. As his eyeballs turned dark green, hair drilled out of his body, and sharp claws grew wildly from his fingers. He, who was originally a winged man, unexpectedly turned into a werewolf in just a few breaths. What a strange change! Although Tan Xiao was experienced and knowledgeable, he was still shocked and tongue-tied. A winged man has turned into a werewolf? What kind of monster is this? Tan Xiao took a deep breath. At this moment he brazenly made a move. The long sword suspended in the Dantian world was instantly unleashed by him. In an instant, it turned into a flowing light and pierced the guy's back. "Run!" A roar came from the monster whose heart had been pierced. Chapter 734. The monster that had turned from a wingman into a werewolf endured the fatal injury and dashed to the front of Moo with its powerful body. It unleashed a suicidal attack and crazily rushed toward Moo. The other werewolf, whose claw had been cut off, instantly fled outside. "Catch them!" Tan Xiao instantly retrieved his flying sword and shouted fiercely. Moo roared and bombarded the monster's face with a fistful of tyrannical aura. The sharp claws tore open 8 bloody wounds on his body. At this moment, the flying sword he unleashed flew back and directly cut off the monster's head. Bush, bush. 10 figures flickered lightning fast and chased after the fleeing werewolf. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from the hotel's entrance. The gunshots had stopped. The Phantom Special Combat Squad's captain, Yu Shuqing, and the other 6 members of the squad retreated at the same time. Their backs leaned against the wall as they looked at the headless corpse in front of them with lingering fear. In this lifetime, they had seen countless battles and participated in countless battles, but none of them could compare to this one. Even if they were just bystanders this time, they were just bystanders. These monsters. Emo Xiaonan wiped the blood that splashed on his face and murmured in a trembling voice. In the past, he always thought that as long as he had a gun in his hand, he wouldn't be afraid even if the devil appeared in front of him. But just now, he was scared out of his wits. Cough, cough. They're like the werewolves and birdmen in the movies. Yu Shuqing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, but he didn't bother to deal with the bleeding wound on his chest. His eyes were full of vigilance and the muzzle of his gun was aimed at the hotel's entrance. Tan Xiao came to Moo's side and looked at the wound on his chest. He then took out a holy healing pill and stuffed it into his mouth. Then he said in a deep voice, "Your main task is to heal yourself. Hurry up and heal. I'm afraid there will be a lot of fights coming up." Moo nodded without a word and directly walked to the corner and sat cross-legged. Tan Xiao came to Yu Shuqing and lightly said, "Deal with your injuries. Those Stygian Club's heretics are not people you can deal with. So, as I said before, I really don't need your protection. As long as you can protect yourselves, that's already the greatest help you can give me." The faces of Yu Shuqing and the other members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad alternated between green and white, and thick shame lingered in their hearts. Previously, when Tan Xiao said that he didn't need their protection, they thought that Tan Xiao was too arrogant and reckless. Only now did they understand that they weren't courting death at all. They were simply looking down on them. People. He was looking down on them. Yu Shuqing and the others looked at each other. Apart from a bitter smile and helplessness, there was only a strong sense of humiliation surging in their hearts. Their pride, their complacency, and their self-confidence had all been crushed to smithereens. Tan Xiao did not say anything more to provoke them. After all, they were all ordinary people, and they were once true warriors who dedicated themselves to the country. Gently patting Yu Shuqing's shoulder, Tan Xiao said, "Mist Source Island is now beset with crisis everywhere, and the garrison is facing a huge crisis. I think you should stay in the garrison base with your ability. As for the foreign forces on Mist Source Island, just leave them to me." Yu Shuqing was silent for a moment and said with difficulty, "I'll explain the situation to Division Commander Yang and Chief of Staff Hu. As long as they issue the order, we'll immediately return to the garrison base." Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "No need to report to them. I'll explain it to them personally later. However, there's one thing I hope you can do me a favor." "What favor?" asked Yu Shuqing quickly. "Keep it a secret," said Tan Xiao. "Whatever you see today must not be spread out, let alone reported to your superiors. I know you're loyal and patriotic soldiers, but you must accept orders." Yu Shuqing fell into silence. With a complicated expression, Mo Xiaonan said, "You mean, we must accept your orders? A secret order?" "That's right," said Tan Xiao indifferently. "We're just temporarily obeying your orders, but we have no responsibility," said Mo Xiaonan. Tan Xiao raised his hand to interrupt him and coldly said, "There are some things I didn't want to say, but it seems that I can only warn you now. The one who sent me to Mist Source Island this time is the #1 leader of the country. Who do you think has more power than him in the entire country? Also, I'll tell you one more thing. Maybe I wouldn't have come if it was just the #1 leader. You've just heard what my enemies said about my identity. As cultivators, what we pursue is power and longevity. We comprehend the heavenly Tao laws and cultivate the heart sword that cuts off the mortal world. But this time, aside from the #1 leader, my grandfather also came to ask me to come here. I don't need to hide it from you. Tang Guoxing is my grandfather, and the Tang family in the imperial capital is my family. Do you think it's necessary to report what happened today?" All the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad looked at each other in dismay with shock on their faces. Never in their dreams did they expect that it was the #1 leader who sent Tan Xiao here, much less that he was Tang Guoxing's grandson. No wonder. No wonder the two leaders sent you to solve the crisis on Mist Source Island. As cultivators, I'm afraid only you can deal with the foreign races. We'll treat this matter as a top military secret. Unless the #1 leader asks, we'll never divulge half a word about it, said Yu Shuqing solemnly. Tan Xiao slightly nodded and said, "Let's stay here for the time being tonight. There are many dangers outside, and I'm afraid the news of us coming here has already been known by many forces. If my guess is correct, I'm afraid it won't be peaceful tonight." "For you." Two middle-aged men in security uniforms came out from the side corridor of the hall. They had flashlights in their hands and a confused look on their faces. However, when the security guard on the left asked, he suddenly exclaimed in horror, "Oh God! Murder! There are dead people here!" His voice faded away. The two men ran away with fear written all over their faces. Nearly exhausting all their strength, they quickly disappeared into the corridor. Tan Xiao couldn't help laughing and said, "You go with them and solve the problem here. I'll stand outside for a while and then come back to take us to our rooms." "Understood." Yu Shuqing nodded. Tan Xiao took out a cigarette, lit it up, and walked out of the hotel's entrance. He looked at the empty night outside and constantly spread his spiritual sense to the surroundings. With his current ability, it wouldn't be a problem for him to release it up to 500 to 600 meters away. However, what made him slightly worried was that Shui Sha, Jinshi, and the others had gone to chase the werewolf and had disappeared from the range of his spiritual sense. Don't worry, boss. Even if Jinshi and the others encounter danger, they can still escape if they can't beat the enemy. Using flying swords to escape is the fastest. Apart from some skin wounds, Mo didn't have any major problems. His bloody wounds had also healed a lot at this moment. I've always had a bad feeling about this, but I can't tell why. Tan Xiu shook his head. Also, the guy we just killed is a bit strange. You mean he showed the characteristics of a winged man at first, but then suddenly turned into a werewolf? Asked Mo. That's right, answered Tan Xiu. After hesitating for a moment, Hila said, I think it should be caused by a potion, boss. That monster hit me with a syringe, and I found some residual green liquid inside the syringe. After I killed it, I examined its body. There was a tiny needle hole in its lower ribs, and there was some dark green residue in its body. If it's really caused by a potion, then it's really interesting, said Tan Xiu with a strange expression. A werewolf can turn into a winged man, which means that the Western foreign races are not at peace. Oh, don't you think that if such a potion really exists, it's the best way to frame someone after an assassination? Indeed. Mo let out a hollow laugh. Suddenly, both of them looked to the southeast at the same time. Aside from the 10 figures flying fast on flying swords, there were also pursuers behind them. For vampires flapped their wings and held strange weapons in their hands, bombarding them with terrifying attacks again and again. Oh, go support them. Tan Xiu instantly soared into the sky. The moment the long sword in his body was unleashed, he brushed past his 10 fleeing subordinates. Immediately after, he raised his arm high and the long sword turned into a 100-meter-long light shadow, fiercely slashing toward the 4 pursuing vampires. The earth-shattering sword seemed to tear open the barrier of space. Countless types of energy swarmed in from all directions, merging into the lightning-fast sword shadow. In 1/100th of a second, the power of this sword had increased by several times. Retreat! A sharp roar came from the mouth of one of the vampires, and his tone was filled with intense panic. In an instant, the 4 vampires frantically retreated. Their speed was very fast, but the lightning-fast sword shadow was even faster. With an overwhelming momentum, it instantly slashed the 4 vampires who were blocking with their weapons. The 4 vampires were like a lone boat in a turbulent sea. They spurted blood and were sent flying hundreds of meters away, smashing large holes in several buildings. Ghost da miasma! A vampire rushed out of the broken building and sprayed out a pitch-black smoke. In just a few breaths, the black smoke frantically spread and enveloped the scenery within a radius of half a kilometer. The 4 vampires then drilled into the Dark Warrior's body and disappeared. Tan Xiu tightly frowned. He found that his spiritual sense was blocked when it came into contact with the black mist. With no other choice, he could only retract his spiritual sense and quickly circled to another direction to chase the place where the 4 vampires disappeared. A few minutes later, Tan Xiu returned to the hotel's entrance. He looked at Jinshi and the others, who looked quite distressed. Tan Xiu frowned and asked, "What's the origin of those 4 vampires?" Chapter 735. Tan Xiu's all-out attack failed to directly kill the 4 vampires and only heavily injured them. Tan Xiu was somewhat shocked. He had learned about the classification of vampires from Shanjena. Therefore, he inferred that the 4 vampires were at least at the Count rank. Count. Shanjena once told him that there were no more than 20 vampires in the entire Western vampire race who could reach the Count rank. But today, 4 of them appeared all of a sudden, causing Tan Xiu to be more cautious. They should belong to the Stygian Club, boss. We had already heavily injured that werewolf, but he was saved by those 4 vampires, said Jinshi bitterly. Tan Xiu slowly nodded and said, those 4 vampires are very powerful. If I don't use some of my trump cards, it will be very difficult for me to severely injure or kill them. Our real enemies have now appeared, so we must be careful in our next actions. Otherwise, we're likely to die on this mist source island. Understood. Everyone replied with a solemn expression. Immediately after, Tan Xiao led everyone back to the hotel, whereas Yu Shuqing led the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad to find the current manager of the hotel, a pale middle-aged man. Mr. Tang, the room is ready. You can check in at any time. This is the room card, said Yu Shuqing respectfully as he handed over a stack of room cards. Tan Xiao ignored the hotel manager. He took the room card, found the room, and then directly stayed there. In the forest outside the city, dozens of kilometers away from the hotel, four vampires with one of their wings cut off were hiding in the bushes with lingering fear. Meanwhile, the heavily injured werewolf was struggling and roaring in front of the four vampires. However, all the blood essence in his body was completely devoured by the four vampires in just half a minute, causing him to die directly. Damn it! One of the vampires wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and kicked the werewolf's shriveled body away. Then he angrily said, "That bastard is too strong. We're not his match even if the four of us join forces. Hence, the possibility of capturing him is zero." Another vampire with bloody eyes said, "He's a Chinese cultivator. Legend has it that he's the descendant of the immortals of the Middle East and has mysterious and unfathomable abilities. Back then, during the Crusades, they were beaten miserably by the Eastern cultivators. I didn't expect that we would actually encounter cultivators from the East. We need to report this matter to the leader." I saw it. A hazy black shadow suddenly appeared. It was a pale-faced young man dressed entirely in black. His two fangs were sharp, and his entire body was emitting a sinister wind. In his hand, there was a black metal sphere. His cold and indifferent expression didn't fluctuate in the slightest as his blood-red eyes swept over the dead werewolf corpse dozens of meters away. "Leader." The four vampires knelt and bowed. Bowles was the name of the young vampire. He was also a trusted subordinate of Keith Moore, one of the 8 bigwigs of the Stygian Club. "We must complete Lord Keith Moore's order without hesitation, even if it means sacrificing our lives to Ancestor Cain. The Eastern cultivator, Tan Xiao, is indeed very strong. That sword attack of his was very powerful. Even if I was hit by it, I would probably be severely injured. Hence, there's only one way to capture him alive, and that's to use blood poison." Having said that, Bowles took out a porcelain bottle and handed it to one of the vampires, saying, "You're to move in the dark and put the blood poison in his food without him noticing. Even if he's an Eastern cultivator, his power will be imprisoned for a short time once he eats the food with blood poison, turning him into a powerless reptile." The four vampires stared at the porcelain bottle with fear in their eyes. As bloodkin, they were naturally aware of the power of the blood poison. Even if they were vampire-level powerhouses, their power would be weakened by half once they were poisoned by the blood poison. As for the other races, they would lose all their power once they were poisoned. Even if they could live for a few more days, they would still die without a doubt. "We'll definitely accomplish the mission, leader," the vampire holding the porcelain bottle said solemnly. "According to the intelligence I got, Wisdom War Elder Wu Jie, one of the pyramid's 10 war elders, has recently sent his men to secretly study the antidote for the darkening virus. Once his men succeed in their research, it will greatly affect our plan. According to His Excellency's deduction, Wisdom War Elder Wu Jie will definitely send his men to obstruct our operation to capture Tan Xiao. Pay attention to the pyramid's people when you carry out the mission and kill them immediately once you find them." Understood. The four vampires' complexions slightly changed and they replied with a murderous aura. At the Grand Hyatt Hotel, Tan Xiao sat cross-legged on the bed and silently practiced the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. With the changes in the space in his dantian, the primal chaos force he possessed had become more massive. If he used it continuously before, he would only be able to use it for 2 hours. But now, he could definitely use it for more than 10 hours. However, after this change, he also found that it was quite a headache for him. It would be much more difficult for him to increase his physical strength in the future, and he would need to absorb more star force. He couldn't even see the end of it. After all, The world in his Dantian was very big with hundreds of millions of planets. If each of them were to grow to the size of a real planet in the universe, he wouldn't be able to do it even after 10,000 years with his current cultivation speed. I originally thought that I would be invincible on Earth after cultivating the heavenly art of cosmic genesis to the peak of the viscera transformation stage. But I didn't expect that there are not only other cultivators on Earth, but also vampires and beastmen with terrifying strength. Since a vampire count's strength was on par with mine, a vampire marquis's strength would probably be on par with mine. In case I encounter a vampire duke or even a higher-level vampire lord, I'm afraid I have no other way but to escape. Tan Xiu opened his eyes, got out of bed, and walked to the window. He looked at the faint light in the sky outside and pondered in silence. He had a lot of means to fight and escape. But even if he could escape alive in front of a real powerhouse, he would most likely be injured. Not to mention, he also brought Mo Au and the others to Mist Source Island. If he really encountered danger, he would never abandon Mo Au and the others and escape alone. Therefore, time to refine an array disk. Tan Xiu closed the curtains, took out a large number of jade materials from the interspatial ring, and began to refine an array disk. Currently, his strength was very low, and he was still unable to set up a powerful formation in a very short period of time. Only with the help of a formation plate could he form a powerful formation in an instant, which could be used to trap or kill the enemy. For 2 days, Tan Xiu didn't eat, drink, or sleep. He went all out to refine array disks. In these 2 days he refined a total of 50 array disks, among which the most powerful was the Star Glory array. Tan Xiu was confident that even if he encountered a vampire duke, he could kill him with the help of this array. The door was closed by Tan Xiu. As he stepped out of the corridor, he saw Mo Au, Jin Shi, and the others sitting cross-legged on the floor. After they got up, Tan Xiu asked, "Did the Phantom Special Combat Squad leave?" "They haven't left yet. They said they'll go back after we leave," said Mo Au. "Then let's go." Tan Xiu said, "Let's bypass the mixed summit city and go to that mountain. If there are people following us, we'll let them follow us as long as they don't attack us." "Aren't we going to solve it directly?" Mo Au was confused. "Don't you think it's better to kill enemies in the deep mountains and forests than in the city?" Tan Xiu said. Mo Au stared blankly for a moment before he immediately understood Tan Xiu's meaning and said, "You don't want to expose your identity in front of ordinary people, boss. We know what to do." Shortly after, everyone came to the lobby on the first floor. When Tan Xiu saw Yu Shuqing and the others waiting there, he immediately said, "Don't forget what we said before. I'll treat your Phantom Special Combat Squad to a drink when we go back. We'll prepare a banquet and wait for your triumphant return," said Yu Shuqing quickly. Tan Xiu let out a faint smile and strode out of the hotel's entrance. At this moment, the feeling of being monitored arose spontaneously again. However, he ignored it and didn't even release his spiritual sense to observe. After sitting in the cars, the 4 cars quickly left. After 2 hours of travel, the 4 cars had bypassed the mixed summit city and were only a dozen kilometers away from the mountain in the center of Mist Source Island. From here, they could vaguely see the mountain shrouded in clouds and mist more than 10 kilometers away. However, the summit was shrouded in clouds and mist, so they couldn't see the majestic palace. "Boss, there are 2 groups of people following us from both sides." After a long time of observation, Mo Au, who was driving, finally couldn't help but report, "Let them continue to follow us." Tan Xiu sneered. "I'd like to see what their ultimate purpose is." Mo Au nodded and sped up a lot at this moment. With the passage of time, they soon came to a place a few kilometers away from the foot of the mountain. "How high is this mountain?" After getting off the car, Tan Xiu looked up at the mountain and asked. "We visually measured it before, but the result was very helpless. There's no way to visually estimate the exact height, but we can infer that it's at least a kilometer high," said Zidane. Tan Xiu looked at the mist shrouding the mountainside to the foot of the mountain, while the mountainside to the mountaintop was clearly visible. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The mountain was indeed shrouded by a huge array, and this array was very mysterious. Even if he hadn't entered it before, he couldn't see through the mystery of this array. Leave the car here and follow me. We'll try to go in. Boss, I'm afraid we can't go in for the time being. Mo's eyes were full of killing intent as he stared at the left rear. He instantly unleashed his flying sword and it kept hovering around him. Chapter 736. As Tang Xiu looked around, his killing intent instantly soared. 5 lightning-fast figures were approaching them from the edge of the woods a kilometer away, as though they were sharp arrows. In just a few breaths, they had already arrived in front of them. Mr. Tang. Basil's ice-cold eyes fell on Tang Xiu, but his heart was full of annoyance. After 2 days of surveillance, the members of Spectre Squad under his control were still unable to poison Tang Xiu's food even though they had sneaked into the Grand Hyatt Hotel. It was because Tang Xiu hadn't eaten or drunk anything in the past 2 days. Tang Xiu observed the 4 vampires behind Basil and instantly recognized them. They were the ones who chased Jin Shi and the others 2 days ago and were forced to retreat by his sword. Now, it seemed that their injuries had actually healed. Are you also members of the Stygian Club? Basil's every movement was noble and elegant. His slender and fair fingers fiddled with the metal ball in his hand as he nodded and said, "We're the subordinates of Sir Keith Moore of the Stygian Club. The previous assassin was too rude to Mr. Tang, so we've already killed the werewolf who escaped. Mr. Tang, our lord wants to see you. I hope you can give us face and come with us." "He wants me to go with him just because he wants to see me, huh?" Tang Xiu sneered. "How dare he be so arrogant in our Chinese territory? He's really asking to be taught a lesson. You can go now. Tell that guy to come here if he wants to see me. I can see him if I'm in a good mood." Basil's fingers fiddling with the metal ball instantly stopped. Killing intent flashed in his ice-cold eyes as he coldly said, "Mr. Tang, I know you're all Eastern cultivators. But I've seen the strength of your men before. They can't even beat my Spectre Squad. You do have some skills, but I'm afraid it's not enough to look at me. So, please come with us if you don't want us to drink the blood of you and your men." "Are you threatening me?" Tang Xiu sneered and said, "I'll replace Dan Dan and arrange the 10-direction sword array. I'll deal with this brat myself if he dares to move." Mo, Jin Shi, and the others stepped forward one after another. The flying swords hovering around them instantly shot out. Basil's eyes were filled with disdain as he retreated 100 meters in an instant. As for the 4 vampires, they licked their lips and laughed maniacally. As the long blades on their backs were unsheathed, the 4 divine weapons of the Blood Clan, the dark magic blade, emitted a dark glow. "A loser." A vampire earl sneered. He spread his wings and dashed in front of Mo. He raised his sword and slashed at Mo. Set up the formation. Mo didn't panic in the face of danger. With a loud shout, the flying sword instantly entangled with the other 9 flying swords. Mo's figure disappeared in a flash and soared into the sky with Jin Shi and the others. They stepped on the void, and their figures became dreamy and illusory, drifting erratically. Killing body drinking blood. The 4 vampires soared into the sky. Their strength was faintly stronger than Jin Shi and the others, so the 4 dark magic blades slashed through the sky in an attempt to kill the 10 people. Basil, who stood 100 meters away, revealed a smile in his eyes. 2 days ago, his 4 Spectre subordinates were able to chase and beat up Tang Xiu's men. But now, in his opinion, it was Tang Xiu's men who would eventually be killed. Even if one of them was replaced, the outcome was already doomed. He couldn't understand it. Why was Tang Xiu so stupid? Didn't he see the miserable appearance of his subordinates in the battle 2 days ago? A kilometer away, more than a dozen men and women hiding in the woods on the other side could clearly see the beginning of the battle. Shu was clenching a dagger, but his face was full of excitement. "Big brother Shu, it seems we were right not to act immediately. Now that Basil has led his Spectre team to attack, we can just sit back and reap the benefits," whispered a cute girl in a black leather coat with a smile on her face. "You're right." Shu nodded and smilingly said, "No matter who wins and who loses, both sides will end up with a lose-lose situation. We'll be the last one to appear, and we can easily get rid of them all." Hee hee, the War Wisdom Elder will give us a lot of rewards for our contribution. I can't wait to see both of them suffer a lose-lose situation. The girl giggled. But who do you think will win, Big Brother Shu? It's Basil's team, of course, said Shu. Haven't you noticed? Basil's specter companion, Ality, hasn't appeared yet. You must know that Ality's strength is even stronger than Basil. The smile on the girl's face receded like a receding tide. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she said, Ality, that damned vampire bastard. He was the one who captured me and imprisoned me in the blood pool for 14 years. He destroyed my metal ability and killed my elder sister. Today, I'm going to kill him with my own hands and burn his soul with the hellfire. Shu grabbed the girl's arm and whispered, Don't release your aura, else they will sense it. Alright. The girl suppressed her hatred and nodded heavily. Near the mountain shrouded in clouds and mist, 10 hazy silhouettes flickered constantly. 10 flying swords transformed into thousands of sword shadows, layer upon layer like a blooming lotus of sword light. When the 4 devil saber shadows slashed down, the lotus of sword light instantly broke away from them and collided with the saber light. Bim! 2 surging auras instantly erupted with a deafening roar. As the lotus of swords shattered, the 4 demonic blades also became very fragile. Yet, the blades were still spreading upward. The collision showed that the 4 vampires had the upper hand. However, the situation reversed 360 degrees in the blink of an eye. Another wave of lotus of swords separated and directly collided with the demonic blade's lights. Watch out! The 4 vampires' complexions slightly changed. They twisted their bodies in a strange manner and abruptly moved several meters in the air, dodging the lotus of swords that continued to rush down after the demonic blade's lights dissipated. Fall! Mo all roared. The decagon sword array, which had been completely formed, instantly fell down and enveloped the 4 vampires. One after another, lotus of swords appeared out of thin air and floated toward the 4 vampire counts. Damn it! What the hell is this? One of the vampire counts smashed 2 lotus of swords, but more lotus flowers stained his body. Blood splattered all over his body as a ghastly wound appeared on his body. The other 3 vampires also encountered the same problem. As the number of lotus flowers increased, more and more wounds appeared on their bodies. Even their flapping wings were wounded and their speed slowed down a lot in just a dozen seconds. Joint attack! One of the vampires roared and instantly gathered with the other 3 vampires. The dark magic blade in their hands crazily slashed out and smashed hundreds of lotus swords in one breath. You're courting death! Mo all coldly snorted and instantly dashed to the front of a vampire. His flying sword pierced the vampire's chest, and he kicked the vampire away with his foot. The next moment, Jean Sher's figure also instantly appeared. His flying sword pierced a vampire's throat and directly penetrated it as his palm slapped the vampire's forehead. Shueisha also. Puff, puff, puff. Amidst the flashing figures of the 10 people, the 3-dimensional sword array composed of lotus swords brought great damage to the 4 vampires again and again. Several of the wounds were absolutely fatal to the 4 vampires. Obliterate! Mo Ao's group of 10 finally stopped attacking and instantly grabbed their respective flying swords. The moment they surrounded the 4 vampires, they slashed down lightning fast. Shrill screams came from the mouths of the 4 vampires. 2 of the vampire counts were even dismembered by the sword light at this moment. Pieces of minced flesh fell to the ground, and blood splattered like rain. As for the other 2 vampire counts, one of them had his heart core shattered, and his body was drenched in blood as he fell to the ground. He had completely lost his breath. Only the other vampire count fell to the ground, barely breathing, and sent up layers of dust. How is this possible? Basil was stunned by the tragic battle situation and was even more shocked by the result of the fight. He was confident that his 4 subordinates could kill all of Tan Xiu's men. Who would have thought that the result would turn out like this? He was distressed. His heart ached so much that it was bleeding. It must be noted that the 4 vampire counts under his command were his most powerful subordinates and also the reason why he could have a higher status in the Stygian club. Otherwise, with just his own strength and the two companion brothers, he definitely wouldn't be valued as much as he was now. Bush, bush, bush. Mo-Ao's group of 10 landed from the sky and neatly stood in front of Tan Xiao. Apart from being stained with the blood of the 4 vampires, they didn't suffer any injuries. Well done. Tan Xiao applauded. Vampire counts are just SOSO. Basil flashed and dashed to the side of the only surviving subordinate who was riddled with scars. He felt a bit better after checking the man's injuries. Although the man's injuries were severe, his heart core was not shattered and there was still hope for him to survive. At this moment, Tang Xiu instantly appeared behind Mo-Ao's group of 10. As he unsheathed his long sword, an earth-shattering power instantly burst out and fiercely slashed toward Basil and the injured vampire count. After absorbing the energy of heaven and earth, the 100-meter-long sword shadow became even more powerful. With just one strike, Basil's complexion crazily changed. His figure instantly disappeared 100 meters away, whereas the subordinate he couldn't save in time was slashed into 2 halves. Despite escaping fast enough, Basil's back was hit by the sword energy, leaving several bloody wounds that looked hideous and terrible. Buzz, a hazy shadow swept past Tang Xiu's body. Tan Xiu's pupils shrunk. The invisible crisis made his hair stand up in an instant. Relying on his superhuman perception, he didn't have the time to release his spiritual sense and fiercely swept the sword in his hand to the left. Chapter 737. The two forces collided invisibly, causing Tan Xiu's body to fly tens of meters sideways before he staggered and stabilized himself. In another direction, a vampire dressed in a black knight's suit revealed himself. Even his arm was badly mutilated by the sword aura from the collision just now. So strong. Aladi's wings were splashed by the sword energy and the pain nearly suffocated him. After flying backward for tens of meters, he immediately fled far away. He wouldn't have such a feeling if it was a frontal confrontation. He just launched a sneak attack and Tan Xiu's counterattack didn't even use his full strength. Aladi, how is it? Basil flew to Aladi's side with a horrified expression. His heart twitched a few times when he saw the man's badly mutilated arm. Aladi shot a deep look at Tan Xiu's direction and bitterly said, "That guy's not human at all. He's way too powerful. That sword strike of his is almost comparable to Sir Keith Moore's. Let's retreat. I'm afraid only Sir Keith Moore can defeat him." Basil was full of unwillingness, yet he couldn't refute Aladi's words. He knew that Aladi was telling the truth. Even if he and Aladi joined forces, they wouldn't be that guy's match. Let's go. The two figures didn't stay and instantly bolted in the direction they came from. In the mountain forest a kilometer away, Su was dumbfounded as he watched the scene ahead. He never dreamed that such an ending would happen. Just a moment ago, he vowed that the Stygian Club's Spectre team would win. But in just a short time, the 4 vampires of the Spectre team were slaughtered. Even the Spectre team's leader, Basil, was forced to retreat. Even Basil's companion, Aladi, was defeated. It was just like an invisible slap on his face. Could it be that the strength of Eastern cultivators was really that strong? Su's throat was a bit dry. Such an ending made him at a loss. He had more than a dozen men with him. If he were to fight Basil's vampires, the odds of him winning or losing would only be 50-50. But now, even Basil's 4 men were beheaded, and even Basil and Aladi had to flee in panic. Even if he brought his men there, he wouldn't be able to gain any advantage, right? What to do? Was he supposed to leave just like that? Were they really going to give up on the mission Lord Wujia had given them? The cute girl standing beside Si Wu clenched her fists tightly, and her eyes almost spat fire. She hadn't expected things to turn out like this. She hadn't expected that damned vampire Aladi to run away so shamelessly. She wanted to kill Aladi. She wanted nothing more than to grind his bones to dust. But now that he'd escaped, she couldn't do anything to him. Si Wu, who was in a dilemma, suddenly brightened his eyes. He keenly saw that Tan Xiu, who was surrounded by his men, spat out a mouthful of blood. What did this mean? This meant that Tan Xiu was injured, and his injury was very serious. A chance. Siwoo made up his mind and said in a deep voice, Earthwalker, Moas, each of you bring 2 people to approach them from underground. You must injure some enemies when they are caught off guard. Shadowless. Follow behind King Kong and the rest and seize the opportunity to sneak an attack on Tan Xiu. Even if you can't kill him with 1 strike, you must injure him more severely. Hei Feng and the other 2 follow me. In the distance, Tan Xiu coughed out a mouthful of blood. His eyes casually glanced at the direction where Siwoo and the rest were hiding. With his vigilance, he had long known that there were other forces besides the Stygian Club's people following them. Tan Xiu had even speculated where they were hiding. He didn't suffer any injury, and he deliberately forced the blood out. Alidi's sneak attack only made his arm numb and the blood in his body churn. In just a few seconds, he had already recovered to his original state. Watch out for the enemies. Tang Xiu took advantage of the moment when he was surrounded and quickly reminded them. Mo Au and the rest had long known that there were 2 groups of people following them. Upon hearing Tan Xiu's warning, they immediately realized that there was another group of people who had yet to appear. Feng Yang was a core expert of the Everlasting Feast Hall. The reason why he was chosen by Gu Yan was that he had a good aptitude and talent. On the other hand, he had a special ability. Except for a few people in the Everlasting Feast Hall who knew about this special ability, the rest were all dead. He could manipulate the earth element and use the earth attribute ability. Just as everyone saw figures dashing over from a kilometer away, Feng Yang's complexion suddenly changed and he hurriedly said, Some people are coming from underground. They should be earth attribute ability users. Ability users? Heaven and Earth's favorite? Tan Xiu's eyes lit up. Although he had seen ability users before, he had never studied them in depth. In a flash, he quickly grabbed 4 array discs and threw them out at an extremely fast speed. As the array patterns were instantly shot out, the 4 divisions array was arranged by him in just 2 breaths. Feng Yang, do you know about Earth attribute ability users? Tan Xiu stared at the 10 people dashing over with dense killing intent flashing in his eyes. He could sense the killing intent coming from them and knew that they didn't come with good intentions. I'm an Earth attribute ability user, boss, said Feng Yang. Tan Xiu stared blankly for a moment and then looked at Feng Yang with a slightly surprised expression. He nodded and said, Feng Yang, you and Shueisha cooperate with Feng Yang. I'm going to make those Earth attribute ability users stay here. Remember to capture them alive if you can. If you can't, just kill them. Feng Yang said with a confident smile, I guarantee that I'll complete the task. Don't be anxious. If they want to fight with us, they must enter the 4 divisions array, said Tan Xiu. You know the 4 divisions array, so you'll have the upper hand in fighting the enemy inside. Remember, escape immediately once you're injured. I don't want to see anyone die in battle. Mo Au and the others didn't speak. Their task was to kill the enemy. They couldn't decide whether they would live or die in battle. However, they felt very warm toward Boss Tan Xiu's words. After getting along with him for such a long time, they had figured out Tan Xiu's temperament. He was extremely ruthless to the enemy, but he was very protective of his own people. They felt that following such a boss was worth it even if they had to give their lives to him. Kill. Si Wu's special ability was electricity. As the word kill came out of his mouth, an electric current appeared out of thin air, like burning arrows shooting toward Tan Xiu and the others. At his side, a man and 2 women unleashed their respective special abilities. Crystal clear ice arrows, orange metal arrows, and churning fire dragons were shot toward Tang Xiu, Mo Au, and the rest in an overwhelming manner. 7 Stars Sword Array. Jin Shi roared and instantly formed the 7 Stars Sword Array with the other 6 people. Layers of overlapping sword images filled the world in front of them, carrying an overbearing and sharp aura as they collided with the electric current, ice arrows, metal arrows, and fire dragons. Boom! The 7 people's bodies shook violently. The 7 Star Sword Array also became a bit messy, and the array was almost shattered. Si Wu's group of 4 spurted out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. The power of the 4 of them was scattered, while the power of Jin Shi's group of 7 was superimposed. Therefore, Si Wu's group of 4 suffered a small loss in the confrontation. Array, activate. A cold light flashed in Tan Xiu's eyes as he activated the 4 symbols array without hesitation. As Si Wu's group of 4 flew backward, their backs slammed heavily on the invisible energy shield. The 4 symbols array had a total of 4 characteristics: entrapment, attack, hallucination, and blessing. Unless one was proficient in the 4 symbols array, once one fell into it, not only would he suffer from 2 forms of attack, but he would also be trapped inside, unable to withdraw from the array. In addition, as long as the person controlling the 4 symbols array made a move, he could also bless his own people in the array. This kind of powerful 4 symbols array was very common in the immortal world, but it was completely different on Earth. Tan Xiu had studied the 4 symbols array on Earth. It was so crude that one could not bear to look at it. Usually, it was just 4 people joining forces and changing their positions to attack in a cycle. One advanced while the other retreated. It was endless, mysterious, and powerful. It was infinitely mysterious and powerful. In Tan Xiu's eyes, this situation in the eyes of modern people was extremely ridiculous. Boom, boom, boom. The ground was suddenly torn open by the 6 figures. Earth arrows shot out, and weapons made of earth instantly attacked Feng Yang, Mo Ao, and Xue Sha, who had revealed themselves. Moreover, there were even sharp wind blades, water swords, and fire snakes mixed within them, counterattack. Feng Yang's muscles trembled. As the fight for the thick earth began, the earth arrows suddenly stopped, and the weapons made of earth also stopped instantly. In an instant, the earth arrows changed direction, and the weapons made of earth also attacked the surroundings. The wind blades were destroyed, the water swords were scattered, and the fire snakes twisted and dissipated. Earthwalker, Mose, and the other 4 ability users, who rushed up from the ground, were instantly caught unprepared by this change. At this moment, Mo Ao and Xue Sha brazenly attacked. Their flying swords were as fast as meteors, and while the 6 people were in a panic, they took away streaks of blood. Block it! Earthwalker and Mose roared at the same time. Suddenly, an earth wall blocked in front of the 2 people. The other 4 people were not so lucky. The defense they used in a hurry was penetrated in an instant. 2 flying swords pierced through their chests and swept across their necks. In 1/100th of a second, the 4 people were killed on the spot. Tan Xiu stood at the eye of the 4 symbols formation, looking at Su and the others who suddenly became like headless flies. A smile appeared on his face. In terms of strength and mysterious talent, these people were very powerful. If not for the 4 symbols formation, they would be even more difficult to deal with than the vampires. What a pity! They had found the wrong enemy this time. Tan Xiu's eyes swept over the 4 killed ability users, and he shouted in a deep voice, "I've changed my mind. These ability users are all enemies. Don't leave them alive. Kill them all." As he spoke, he formed a seal with both hands and quickly sent them out. He activated the attack ability of the 4 symbols formation at this moment. Chapter 738. The female ability user, who was controlling the 2 fire dragons to attack Jinshi, instantly felt a bone-piercing chill spreading from the ground up along her legs. Just as she lowered her head, her eyes widened in disbelief. Her legs were actually sealed by ice? Moreover, the ice was spreading to her upper body at a terrifying speed? How was this possible? Weren't the enemies cultivators? Were there also ability users among cultivators? Puff, a sword light flashed past, and the female ability user's neck was instantly severed. Her vision kept tumbling, and she saw her own headless body spurting blood. Massacre! It was also a massacre! Apart from Si Wu and his 3 other companions, more than a dozen ability users were all killed in just 2 or 3 minutes. Among Tan Xiu's men, only Jinshi had a cut on his arm, while the others didn't even lose a few hairs. What the hell is this place? Si Wu had already discovered the strange situation in the 4 symbols array. He desperately launched attacks and even triggered lightning to wreak havoc, but there was still no way to destroy everything. What he could find was that his men were constantly being killed, while he could only helplessly resist the attacks of others, powerless to do anything. Big Brother Si Woo, activate the blood curse. The cute girl staggered to avoid the attacks of several flying swords and took out a paper talisman from her bosom. In an instant, Si Woo and the other two also took out paper talismans. When the four of them used their abilities to activate the paper talismans, a rudimentary aura suddenly burst out and a strong bloody light fused together to form a bloody storm. At the eye of the array, Tan Xiu's pupils suddenly shrank. After sensing the violent aura, he instantly used the four symbols array to roll up Mo Au and the others. As his body frantically retreated, everyone had already withdrawn from the four symbols array. Even when Tan Xiu retreated, he suddenly felt the surroundings of the four symbols array crack like glass, and then it was shattered by the impact of the bloody storm. Puff! Four figures rushed out of the broken four symbols array, but at the moment they sprinted, they simultaneously opened their mouths and spurted out a bloody mist. Immediately after, the four of them looked like frosted eggplants, their spirits dispirited as they fell to the ground 100 meters away. Tan Xiu looked at the place where the four beasts formation was set up with lingering fear. A huge pit with a radius of 100 meters had been blasted out, and it was more than 2 meters deep. He couldn't imagine how many of Mo Au and the others would have survived if he had retreated a few seconds later. This is the power of the blood curse? The killing intent in Tan Xiu's eyes intensified. Like lightning, his figure rushed towards Si Woo and the other three. Just as the four of them jumped up, he brandished his long sword and ruthlessly slashed at them. Boom! The four of them hastily set up their defenses, but they crumbled under the might of the sword. Moreover, the four of them were sent flying tens of meters away by the monstrous sword chi before crashing into the ground once again. This time, except for Si Woo, who was struggling to get up, the other three had already fainted. The sword light flashed, and the heads of the three fainted paranormals were separated from their bodies. Si Woo, on the other hand, was silently slashed into two halves by Feng Yang, who drilled out of the soil. The dust had settled. Tan Xiu looked at the aftermath of the battle, as well as Mo Au and the others who were sprinting over. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "We didn't even figure out the identity of this group of enemies, yet we killed them all. That's really interesting. Feng Yang, stay here. The rest will immediately clean up the mess." Feng Yang came to Tan Xiu's side. He rolled his eyes and whispered, "Do you want to set up a trap, boss?" "What do you mean?" asked Tan Xiu, confused. "Let's kill all these people. There must be someone more powerful behind them," said Feng Yang. "If we set up the scene, we can make them mistakenly think that it's the Stygian Club's people who did it. Perhaps a war will break out between these two forces." Tan Xiu raised his hand to touch his chin and thoughtfully said, "You mean framing them?" "That's right, framing them." Feng Yang nodded. "The Stygian Club can't get along with us, so we'll give them one more enemy. The people we killed were all adepts. If I also use my ability and leave some clues, then we'll throw the vampires' corpses there. I believe the people behind these ability users will definitely target the Stygian Club." Tan Xiu's eyes lit up as he smilingly said, "It seems that my men are indeed talented. Feng Yang, your suggestion is good. Let's do it like that." "Do you have any instructions for me to stay here, boss?" asked Feng Yang. "Let's not talk about it for the time being." Tan Xiu waved his hand and said, "You and the others will arrange it first. We'll enter the mountain half an hour later." Half an hour later, after everything was arranged properly, Tan Xiu led everyone to the place shrouded in white mist. He released his spiritual sense, yet it couldn't penetrate the white mist. It was as though the white mist in front of him had a viscous substance that strongly obstructed his spiritual sense. "Boss, are you going to break this array?" Mo Au, who was at Tan Xiu's side, asked with a curious expression. Tan Xiu shook his head and took out a piece of paper from his interspatial ring. He quickly engraved the runes on it and then folded it into a kite. The moment he loosened it, the kite seemed to have its own intelligence and flew into the white mist. Tan Xiu then led Mo Au and the others to follow it and entered the white mist. This is a guide kite. As cultivators, you need some spells and divine abilities. You have cultivation, but you don't have the ability to cast spells and divine abilities. You'll be at a disadvantage once you encounter other cultivators in the future. I'll slowly teach you some spells and divine abilities when we return to Demonic City. Understood. Mo and the others looked happy and respectfully replied. It was a guide kite. It was a small spell that was easy to cast. It didn't have much effect, but it could move forward in a straight line according to the master's intention. If one followed it into the mist, they wouldn't lose their way inside. As their footsteps continued to move forward, they went about 100 meters deep inside and couldn't even see their own fingers. Furthermore, a special air pressure was blocking them, preventing Jin Shi and the others from going any further. The pressure is too much, boss. We can't bear it, said Jin Shi in a deep voice. With his keen eyesight, Tang Xiu was able to clearly see everyone's faces. He found that their faces were pale and obviously strenuous. He immediately halted his pace and released a huge aura from his body to contend with the pressure. Huff! Tang Xiu's body trembled and he retreated a dozen steps in an instant before he staggered and stabilized his body. However, he still coughed up a mouthful of blood. Just as he released his aura to contend with the pressure, a vast ocean-like power whizzed over and instantly crushed his aura. Are you all right, boss? Mo and the others retreated one after another and surrounded Tang Xiu with worried faces. Tang Xiu raised his hand to wipe off the blood on his lips. He shook his head and forced a smile. I'm fine. I was just careless just now. I didn't expect this array to be so powerful that the pressure it emits can injure me. However, I've figured out the principle of this array, so it'll be easy to crack it. You can crack it? Asked Mo with a pleasantly surprised expression. I can crack it, but I can't, said Tang Xiu. We don't know what's inside this array, so there may be some unexpected changes if we crack it rashly. Therefore, you must follow behind me and pay attention to my footsteps. You can avoid the pressure in the white mist as long as you follow my footsteps. Yi Shisan suddenly asked, We haven't seen you comprehend the mysteries of this array, boss. How did you comprehend it? Tang Xiu glanced at him and smilingly asked, Do you want to learn something about arrays? Yeah, I do, said Yi Shisan with a dry smile. I'll write a book about arrays after we return to Shanghai. Tang Xiu nodded and said, I'll teach you some things when the time comes. As a matter of fact, I've been secretly observing the situation inside and analyzing the mysteries of this array all the way here. I just resisted the pressure in the white mist and peeked at the last part that I couldn't understand. The result was out of my expectation and I got a bit injured. However, I've already peeked at the final profundity, so I can crack it if I want to. Yi Shisan suddenly understood and said with admiration, You're really amazing, boss. Don't flatter me, boss. Tang Xiu smilingly scolded him. You may become an array grandmaster as long as you work hard in the future. Yeah. Yi Shisan nodded with expectation. Tang Xiu then retrieved the kite again. Under its lead, the group passed through the white mist for more than 600 meters and finally reached the foot of the mountain. It's so beautiful. Even these people who had killed people like Scything Flax couldn't help but be attracted by the beautiful scenery at first glance. The mist inside was very light, just like a fairyland with immortal energy lingering around it. The flowers were beautiful, the trees were full of vitality, the beasts were docile, and the beautiful scenery was hazy. What surprised everyone the most was that there was a gurgling river flowing upstream toward the mountainside. This scene defied gravity, as well as the colorful fishes that jumped out of the water from time to time, was an eye-opener for everyone. There were many antique and small bridges on the river, each of which had a different shape. Some were arched, some were straight, some were meandering, and some were even half-moon-shaped. Let's go up the mountain. Tang Xiu strode forward and quickly walked up. When he crossed the bridge and stepped on the ground, an invisible force pressed down on him. Despite his formidable strength, he was still shaken by the pressure. Be careful. There's something strange going on. Tang Xiu squinted his eyes and said without looking back. At the same time, he resolutely strode forward and walked inside again. With every step he took, he felt the pressure increase and each step was more strenuous than the previous one. Just like that, Tang Xiu led everyone forward. Chapter 739. As the saying goes, the more beautiful the appearance, the more extreme the danger lurks. Just like this picturesque mountain forest, which seemed to be full of flowers and shady trees, the misty white mist added a bit of immortal aura. But Tan Xiao and the others stepped on the bridge and walked less than 100 meters before they halted their footsteps as if they were facing a formidable enemy. A white pigeon. That's right. It was a white pigeon, but its physique was dozens of times bigger than an ordinary white pigeon. It was not inferior even to a bull. It strolled lazily among the flowers and grasses. Even when it noticed the arrival of Tan Xiao and the others, it just glanced at them casually and then spat out a flame. The moment the blue flame touched the flowers and grasses, they were instantly burned to ashes. When it fell to the ground, a football-sized stone was touched by the flame and turned into charred ashes that drifted away with the wind. This monster, Xue Sha, was very courageous, but he was still startled by the scene in front of him. Tan Xiao took a deep look at the white pigeon before his eyes slowly moved around. A few seconds later, he found an ant climbing on a towering ancient tree. The ant was the size of an adult's fist. It was tens of meters away, and even its claws could be seen clearly. "Over there," Ao suddenly whispered. Tan Xiao looked in the direction of his finger and his eyes couldn't help but twitch a few times. A hedgehog drilled out of the bushes 40 to 50 meters away. The hedgehog's physique was even bigger than the white pigeon that was as strong as a bull. The spikes all over its body swayed in an extremely rhythmic manner. Its pointed mouth and nostrils exhaled white gas that was like a cold air that formed a layer of frost on the flowers and grasses below. "Keep moving." Tang Xiao didn't sense any hostility from these wild beasts. Even when he deliberately approached White Pigeon, it only glanced at him lazily and then leisurely walked away as though it was taking a stroll in the park. Half an hour later. Although Tan Xiao was surprised, he was still calm. However, Timo Ao, Jin Shi, and the others were shocked by the wild beasts here. As they climbed up, they had already encountered hundreds of animals after climbing a quarter of the way up. Each animal was dozens or even hundreds of times larger than the animals outside. These animals all had their own unique characteristics, but they all had one thing in common, which was flight. Even a pig could walk in the void and fly slowly. Spirit Beast Paradise. Tan Xiao smiled as he recalled the spirit beasts he raised in the immortal world. These spirit beasts were all intelligent, and some of them were very intelligent. For example, a group of apes that were more than 2 meters tall. Even though they did not have any ill intentions towards the group, they still playfully threw fruits at the group a few times. "Boss, we can't go up?" Mo Ao's forehead was dripping with sweat, and his face was flushed as he spoke with difficulty. Tan Xiao looked at Mo Ao and then at the others. Finally, he helplessly said, "Stay here since you can't go up. Ah Wu, you're wearing an interspatial ring, so let everyone pick the precious herbs and store them in the interspatial ring. Also, take all the spirit fruits and ores." "Understood." Mo Ao slightly nodded. They had encountered too many precious herbs and spirit fruits along the way, many of which were even 1,000 years old. A large number of trees had all kinds of spirit fruits, and even a faint fruity aroma could be smelled from afar. As for the precious ores, there were a lot of them here. They could find several precious ores anywhere they looked, and any one of them could be sold for a high price outside. There was no way up this mountain. Tan Xiao stepped on the stone and jumped again and again, constantly climbing while withstanding the pressure. All the precious herbs, spirit fruits, and ores he encountered along the way were all stored in his interspatial ring. It took him 2 hours to reach the halfway point of the mountain. In these 2 hours, his harvest was more than the sum of all the herbs, spirit fruits, and precious ores he had obtained outside. "I can't go up." Tan Xiao was a bit regretful. He could only look at the majestic palace at the top of the mountain, yet his footsteps were blocked by the huge pressure from above. Fortunately, his physique was far stronger than ordinary people, else he wouldn't even be able to reach the halfway point of the mountain. Tan Xiao wanted to use this huge pressure to stimulate his potential and temper his physique, but the darkening virus outside had yet to be completely solved, so he could only give up and plan to come back again later when he had the time. On the way down the mountain, Tan Xiao encountered several 7+ meters tall spirit beasts, one of which was a huge tiger. Just the aura it exuded made Tan Xiao's heart tremble. Fortunately, these spirit beasts didn't have any intention to attack and didn't even care about Tan Xiao's appearance. Whoosh! Tan Xiao jumped down from a boulder and appeared at Mo Ao's side. He smiled and said, "Gather everyone. Let's leave this place. There are so many resources here, boss. I think we should stay here for a while," said Mo Ao quickly. "It's not easy for us to come here, so we should bring more back so that we can have more resources in the future. We don't need to rush since this mountain can't run away." Tan Xiao smiled. "Let's solve the problems outside first, and then we can have a lot of spare time to look for cultivation resources. Don't worry. I'll call Xiao Xue after we go out and ask her to bring some people here. It's me who's afraid of being poor. Please don't laugh at me, boss." Mo Ao suddenly understood and said with a smile. Tan Xiao just smiled and didn't say anything, yet he was well aware of Mo Ao's mentality. Speaking of which, the Everlasting Feast Hall indeed didn't have many resources. Although they had been spending a lot of money recently to buy a lot of medicinal herbs, precious ores, and other cultivation materials through various channels, the Everlasting Feast Hall had a large number of people and a large number of children that needed to be trained. Hence, the amount of resources allocated to each person was pitifully small. Tan Xiao and the rest came to the foot of the mountain and smoothly got out of the white mist-shrouded area. Everyone boarded the vehicles and directly left. After traveling for more than half an hour, the 4 SUVs directly headed toward Twin Brook City after they found that no one was following them. Taking advantage of this time, Tan Xiao ate a red fruit. As the energy contained in the red fruit blended into his body, the faint feeling of hunger completely disappeared. Furthermore, he gradually fell asleep since he hadn't slept for 2 or 3 days. Creak! The sudden breaking sound awakened Tan Xiao from his sleep, and the inertia nearly caused him to hit the chair in front of him. With a frown, Tan Xiao looked ahead and asked, "What's the matter?" Mo turned his head and said, "There are dead bodies on the roadside, boss. A lot of them." Tan Xiao stared blankly for a moment. After he opened the door and got off, he immediately saw dozens of corpses on both sides of the road. Some of the corpses had even rotted, and some bugs were buzzing around them. They're not killed, but infected by the darkening virus? Anger rose inside Tan Xiao's heart. The Stygian Club's members were the culprits of the darkening virus. He got the news a few days ago that hundreds of people had died from the darkening virus. However, he didn't see any dead bodies, so his anger was not strong. At this moment, if the Stygian Club's members were here, he couldn't wait to use all means to exterminate those damn executioners. Collect their corpses and bury them. Tan Xiao ordered and turned back to the car. He took out a cigarette, lit it up, and took 2 deep puffs. He wanted to call Gu Xiaoxue, but found that there was no signal on his mobile phone. After thinking about it, he called Mo Ao. It was because Division Commander Yang had given them some communicators when they came out of the Mist Source Island garrison base. All of them were stored in Mo Ao's interspatial ring. Using the communicator, Tan Xiao dialed Gu Xiaoxue's cell number and said, "Xiaoxue, I'll send you the coordinates later. Bring some of our people who are proficient in medicinal herbs and ores. We found a treasure mountain with a lot of precious medicinal herbs and ores." "Understood, Grand Master," Gu Xiaoxue replied. Tan Xiao thought for a while and asked, "How is Yenner now?" "Master still stays inside the exquisite pagoda to recuperate and only comes out once in a while," said Gu Xiaoxue. "However, Master's injury is healing very fast and is expected to be completely healed within 2 years. That's good. Tell her to stay in the Everlasting Feast Hall. I'm now carrying out a very important task outside. I can't tell when I can deal with it for the time being," said Tan Xiao. "You'll understand the situation here when you bring some people here. Tell Yenner that I'll go directly to Jingmen Island after I'm done with the things here." "Understood." After hanging up the phone, Tan Xiao smoked 2 more cigarettes in a row. Mo Ao and the others buried dozens of corpses. The place was in the middle of nowhere, and the surrounding environment was terribly quiet. However, not long after the car started, The two cars in front of them roared over. The two cars were driving extremely fast, reaching a speed of almost 180 kilometers per hour. When they saw the four SUVs, they didn't even think of slowing down. Instead, when the deafening metal music got closer and closer, they sped up a lot. Arrogant. Crazy. The most shocking thing was that there was a person tied with a rope on the roof of the car in the front. The person looked like a child. Stop them. A cold light flashed in Tanshio's eyes as he shouted in a deep voice. Immediately, he turned the steering wheel and immediately slowed down after moving to the side, moving side by side with the SUVs behind. As the window rolled down, he signaled the car driven by Yi San to stop. Screech. The two cars 100 meters away screeched to a halt and stopped only a dozen meters away from Tanshio's SUV. At this moment, Tanshio could clearly see that the person tied on the roof of the car was a teenage girl. The little girl's clothes were ragged and blood-stained. She's still alive? Tanshio's pupils suddenly shrunk. He instantly opened the door and went out. Seeing 7 or 8 burly men jump out of the two cars and walk toward him while cursing and swearing, a wave of hostility crazily rose inside his heart. Chapter 740. Tang Xiu looked at the dying little girl on the roof. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that these damned bastards would be so cruel to tie a living child on the roof of the car at a speed of 180 kilometers per hour. If the rope were to loosen halfway and the little girl was thrown out, she would definitely be smashed into pieces and turned into meat paste. Animals. Tan Xiu looked at these people as if he was looking at corpses. There was nothing but indifference. Hey, where the fuck did you come from? Fuck you. Are you deliberately blocking the road? Don't you know who we are? The big man in the lead quickly pulled out a knife from his waist and pointed it at Tang Xiu as he scolded angrily. Tan Xiu snorted coldly and raised his hand to stop Mo Ao and the others who followed behind him. He looked at the approaching big man and asked, "Who are you people?" The big man stopped 4 or 5 meters away from Tan Xiu and cursed, "We're your fucking father. We're Uncle Jinin's. Why don't you ask around? Who in the entire Mist Source Island dares to block our little boss's car? Though, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and drive them to the side. Don't delay me from going to the power station. Beat them to death if they dare to talk back. Now is a good time. Even killing a few people is like killing a few ants. No one will care about it." A lazy voice came from behind the 7 or 8 big men. A young man with dyed red hair, earrings, and gaudy clothes walked over while yawning. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment. His figure instantly dashed and appeared in front of the 7 or 8 big men in the blink of an eye. His violent fists bombarded their heads. Like a watermelon being hit, 7 or 8 heads were instantly smashed, and 7 or 8 corpses were kicked by Tan Xiu and flew more than 10 meters away. The young man was stunned. His listless look disappeared and was replaced by a deep fear. He realized that he had made a mistake, which was that he seemed to have provoked a terrifying desperado. Furthermore, his subordinates were all top-notch experts who had practiced martial arts for more than 20 years. How could they be so easily killed by the other party? Tan Xiu reached out and grabbed the young man's neck, lifted him up, and asked coldly, "It's the father's fault for not teaching his son well. Tell me who you are." The young man was choked by the neck and his breathing had stopped. As his face continued to turn red, the strength of his body's struggle also began to increase. But his eyes kept blinking at Tan Xiu, as if telling Tan Xiu that he was willing to speak. "Pa." The moment Tan Xiu released him, he slapped him to the ground and then stepped on the side of his face, fiercely saying, "Quick, who the hell made you without tightening their belts?" The young man was stepped on the ground by Tan Xiu. He coughed and then shouted, "Take your foot off me. I'm Miao Wenlei." "You bastard, my dad is the richest man on Mist Source Island, and my family is the most powerful family on Mist Source Island. You offended me, aren't you afraid that my dad will kill you? Miao Wenlei, this name is enough." Tan Xiu moved his foot and directly stepped on Miao Wenlei's neck. Then he fiercely kicked him tens of meters away and hit a big tree. Only then did he ask with a gloomy face, "How long will it take to get to Twin Brook City?" "More than 3 hours," answered Mo Ao. Tan Xiu nodded and came to the front of the car more than 10 meters away. After floating on the roof, Tan Xiu looked at the dying little girl who was not in a coma. He quickly cut the rope and carefully picked her up. This bunch of bastards. Tan Xiu found that the little girl had obviously been beaten up. Several of the bones in her small body were broken. The most important thing was that she had lost a lot of blood and was cold all over. As he injected his primal chaos force into the little girl's body and quickly protected her heart and arteries, Tan Xiu took out a holy healing pill, broke off 1/10 of it and fed it to the little girl. Don't be afraid. I've cleaned up those bad guys. Just bear with it. I'll fix your bones. Just for a while. You'll be fine after a while. The little girl's eyes were lifeless and didn't have the slightest reaction. Even the injuries on her body couldn't bring her the slightest pain. Tan Xiu sighed inwardly. He knew that this little girl had suffered too much pain. Only after suffering for a long time would she become numb. At this moment, he didn't want to waste any more time. He quickly took off her coat and began to fix her bones. Due to the protection of his primal chaos force, Tan Xiu hardened his heart and put her broken bones back into place even though the process was very painful for the little girl. She screamed miserably. The effect of the holy healing pill was excellent. Even if it was only 1/10 of the pill, it was still able to heal the little girl's injuries at an alarming speed. Tan Xiu took off his coat and gently wrapped her. His figure flashed and appeared in front of the off-road vehicle. He handed the little girl to Mo Ao and said in a deep voice, "Keep going." After arriving at Twin Brook City, inquire about the richest man in Mist Source Island. Also, which family does that Miao Wenlei guy belong to? Understood. Mo Ao took the little girl and carefully carried her to the car, giving the driver's seat to Shueisha. A few hours later, a city appeared in front of their eyes. The 4 cars continued to hurry and soon entered the city. The once bustling city was now lifeless. There were almost no cars on the wide road, and only a few pedestrians hurried past the roadside. The Tang Manor Martial School was located in Twin Brook City. After inquiring, the 4 cars quickly stopped at the entrance of the Tang Manor Martial School. To Tan Xiu's surprise, there were 2 young men holding electric fly swatters next to the stone lions outside the Tang Manor Martial School, playing with their mobile phones listlessly. "Who are you?" One of the young men looked up and immediately frowned when he saw Tan Xiu and Mo Ao behind him. "I'm looking for Tang Han," said Tan Xiu. The young man looked at Tan Xiu with a surprised expression and suddenly asked, "You don't have anything that can create static electricity?" "That's right. We're not infected," said Tan Xiu. "How is that possible?" The young man was shocked. "Everyone in the entire Mist Source Island is infected. No, you're from the outside? And you're from foreign countries." Tan Xiu waved his hand to interrupt him and said, "We're from the mainland. If this is the Tang Manor Martial School, I think I've come to the right place. Please take us inside to find Tang Han." "Our school master can't receive guests right now," said the young man hesitantly. "I'm her younger brother," said Tan Xiu. The young man stared blankly for a moment before he rolled his eyes and said, "Our boss is an orphan since childhood. How could she have a younger brother? Brother, you don't look like you're here to make trouble, so I advise you to leave. Although the people in our Tang Manor Martial School are infected, there are still a lot of people who can fight. You'll know whether I'm her younger brother or not after you report it," said Tan Xiu. "I'll give you a few minutes to go and come back quickly." The young man hesitated for a moment and looked at the people behind Tan Xiu before he finally turned around and ran inside. Inside the Tang Manor Martial School, inside an antique study room, Tang Han was holding a book and quietly reading it. Her complexion was a bit pale and she picked up the electric fly swatter from time to turn on the switch to shock herself a few times. "Schoolmaster," called the young man outside the study room. Tang Han looked up and said, "The door isn't closed. Come inside and talk." The young man strode into the study room and said, "Schoolmaster, there's a group of people outside, led by a young man who says he's your younger brother. I wanted to drive them away, but I found that the people he brought are all martial artists, so—" "Younger brother?" Tang Han's expression slightly changed. She instantly got up from the sofa and said in a deep voice, "Take me to see him." The young man looked suspicious, but he still nodded. He had just walked a few steps when he suddenly recalled something and said again, "Schoolmaster, that guy who claims to be your younger brother said he came from the mainland. The most inconceivable thing is that he's not infected by the virus." Tang Han's pace instantly quickened upon hearing it. As she strode out of the martial school's door, her eyes fell on Tan Xiu's face. A complicated look flashed in her eyes, and she suddenly felt like crying. Ever since the darkening virus spread wantonly and infected the entire Miss Source Island, she had been looking forward to her family sending someone over. And at this moment, her family finally came, and it was her younger brother, Tan Xiu. Tang Han didn't have deep feelings for the Tangs, and she couldn't even treat her parents like family members. But since she received a message from her family 6 months ago, she suddenly found that there was another family member among them who suffered the same fate as her, and that was Tan Xiu. She had seen Tan Xiu's photos and information about Tan Xiu. She also knew a lot about what Tan Xiu had done in the past 6 months. There were very few people in this world who could make her admire them, but Tan Xiu made her admire him from the bottom of her heart, and she couldn't help but feel close to him. "Tan Xiu." Tang Han's lips squirmed, and she quickly came in front of Tan Xiu, quietly looking at his handsome face. Tan Xiu also had an inexplicable sense of closeness and respect for Tang Han. Back then, she was sent away by her family at a young age, and the time she spent with them over the years could be counted on one hand. It could be said that she had sacrificed too much for the Tang family. There was no unfamiliarity or estrangement when they first met. Tan Xiu took 2 steps forward and hugged Tang Han in front of everyone's eyes. He whispered, "Sister, you've worked hard." Tang Han's body trembled. Tan Xiu's soft voice hit the softest part of her heart, and 2 lines of tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't struggle and just let Tan Xiu hug her. She shook her head hard and bit her lower lip with her white teeth. "He understands me." Tang Han's heart was touched and warm. At this moment, she felt closer to her younger brother, who had suffered the same fate as her. Chapter 741. In the study room filled with the fragrance of tea, Tan Xiu sat on the soft sofa and watched Tang Han busy making tea and serving snacks. A warm feeling rose inside him. The 2 of them didn't have much interaction outside, but they chatted happily after coming to the study room. "How about this Puhi little brother?" Tang Han sat opposite Tan Xiu and said with a smile. Tan Xiu picked up the small teacup and gently took a sip. Then he nodded and praised, "A tea taster can enjoy the taste of tea to the fullest. Just a sip will leave a fragrant taste in your mouth. This tea is really good, sis." Tang Han's eyes lit up. She gave a thumbs up and praised, "Little brother, you're really worthy to be a top student of Shanghai University. I'll give you the rest of the best tea if you like it." Tan Xiu smiled and said, "A gentleman doesn't take what others like, sis. I rarely have time to calm down and drink tea, so it'll be a waste even if you give it to me. I'll come to visit you when I have more time in the future. You can treat me to this tea then." "All right." Tang Han slightly smiled and took the electric flice water. She turned it on and touched it with her fingers. The static current drilled into her body and helped her suppress the darkening virus inside. Upon seeing this, Tan Xiu got up and came to Tang Han's front. Under her astonished eyes, he grabbed her wrist and felt her pulse. Half a minute later, Tan Xiu said, "Sis, send someone to get a bowl of water. Also, you've been running the Tang Manor Martial Arts School for so many years, so you should have some trusted subordinates. Find them too." Before Tang Han was confused. "To help you remove the toxin of the darkening virus," said Tan Xiu. "What?" Tang Han suddenly jumped up from the sofa and asked with a shocked face, "Little brother, you said you can treat infectious diseases?" "That's right. I can," said Tan Xiu. "I know you're a young miracle-working doctor in the Chinese medicine circle, but I didn't expect you to be so amazing. You can even treat a horrible infectious disease like the darkening virus. Just wait for me. I'll immediately find someone." Tan Xiu stopped her and said with a bitter smile, "Sister, my method is very special, and the things I need are also different. You must never tell anyone that I can cure the darkening virus. Unless it's someone you trust the most, don't bring anyone here and don't tell them. Tang Han asked in confusion, why? The medicine for treating infectious diseases is very special. Even if I refine it day and night, I'm afraid I won't be able to save everyone on Miss Source Island, said Tan Xiu. In addition, the price is too high. It's not a problem to save a small number of people, but if there are too many, we won't be able to save them even if we sell everything we have. Tang Han suddenly understood and said with a face full of regret, using static electricity to suppress the darkening virus is only treating the symptoms but not the root cause. Moreover, static electricity is very harmful to the human body. If we don't find a way to completely remove the darkening virus, I'm afraid Divine Dr. Gui Jianqiu is going all out to research the antidote, said Tan Xiu with a bitter smile. The country will also send a large number of medical experts. Although I'm also a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, I'm not a saint. The best steel should be used on the edge of the blade. I must first solve the problem of the safety of the people I care about. All right. Feeling warm inside, Tang Han gently nodded and said, there are 12 people in the Tang Manor Martial School who are worthy of my trust. They are my loyal supporters and have made a lot of contributions to the Tang family. Further, I've trained an armed team of 206 people, all of whom are loyal and reliable. You see, isn't the number a bit too much? There's no problem with the number. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, hurry up and gather them. I'll immediately treat the others after you're treated. All right. Tang Han went out and came back with a bowl of water shortly after. She watched Tan Xiu break a pill and threw half of it into the water. Following Tan Xiu's instruction, she took it and drank it all. A warm current surged inside her body like a tide, and the weakness brought by the darkening virus was alleviated at an astonishing speed. Although she couldn't see the situation inside her body, she could clearly feel the pain as if a needle was pricking every corner of her body after the comfortable feeling brought by the warm current. She could endure the pain. But the pain for a long time made her suffer unbearably. However, she believed that Tan Xiu wouldn't harm her, so after enduring it for more than half an hour, she couldn't bear the stench coming from her body and quickly rushed to the bathroom. Creak, the study's door was pushed open again. Tang Han, who had just taken a bath, rubbed her belly and came to Tang Xiu's front with a strange expression. Although she still felt a bit weak, she could clearly feel that this weakness was caused by the black substance excreted from her body, as well as the 6 times she had diarrhea. It was not caused by the darkening virus. Little brother, I think I'm cured. Tang Han's eyes sparkled as she said with a smile. Tan Xiu let out a faint smile. The pill he used was the holy healing medicine he got from Ji Qing. Although there weren't many holy healing medicines left, it was still a medicine taken by cultivators, so how could the darkening virus contend with its effect? As a matter of fact, Ji Qimei had followed Gu Yan to Earth. If it weren't for her interspatial ring being destroyed in the space tide and losing all her belongings, she would have been able to refine immortal pills with her immortal tool cauldron if she used it to refine pills. Where are those people, big sis? Tan Xiu stood up and asked with a smile. Come with me, said Tang Han. They've been placed in the dormitory building of the martial arts field and should be gathered there now. A few minutes later, Tan Xiu took Tang Han with Mo and the others as they came to the martial arts field of the Tang Manor Martial Arts School. At this moment, aside from the 206 core members of the martial arts school, there were also 12 confidants trained by Tang Han. These people were all real martial arts experts. Although none of them had reached the level of martial arts grandmaster, their strength was not to be underestimated. Water. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Tan Xiu took the water from Mo and then put a half-holy healing medicine into the water. With a very serious expression, Tang Han said in a deep voice, everyone, some of you may know the one next to me, but some may not. Regardless of whether you know him or not, I need to tell you now that he's my cousin, Tan Xiu. He was ordered by the family to come here to solve the infectious disease problem. To keep in mind that the medicine is extremely rare, so I can only give it to my closest confidants. Therefore, once you take the medicine, the infectious disease problem will be completely solved. You must never spread this matter out. Tang Han's trusted subordinates all revealed looks of pleasant surprise. They were troubled by the darkening virus, and in their hearts, they had already lost all hope. Although stimulating the body with static electricity could temporarily suppress the deterioration of the darkening virus, it was only a glimmer of hope. But now, they finally realized that the crisis could be resolved and their safety could be guaranteed. As the medicine that dissolved the holy healing medicine was taken by everyone, Tang Han immediately dismissed everyone. She was perfectly aware of the consequences of taking the medicine, so she naturally didn't want to see her subordinates embarrassed, let alone smell the stench. After returning to Tang Han's study room, Tan Xiu had just sat down when he asked, "Who's the richest and most powerful person in Mist Source Island? Is it someone surnamed Miao? Miao Hengfu?" Tang Han was surprised. "Why are you asking about him?" Tan Xiu's eyes gleamed with a cold light as he said, "It's the father's fault for not teaching his son well. His son, Miao Wenlei, is simply a beast. I killed Miao Wenlei and some of his thugs. Since I've done it, I must cut the weeds and eliminate the roots to avoid future troubles." Tang Han stared at Tan Xiu with a dumbfounded expression. After a long while, she forced a smile and said, "Little brother, you're really... forget it. I've already killed him, so I must cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. In fact, it's not the father's fault for not teaching his son well. It's just a counterexample of the father is a hero and the son is a hero. Miao Hengfu is ruthless and cunning. God knows how many people he has harmed over the years. However, he always does it cleanly every time. Even if the government wants to take action, they can't find any evidence. Besides, he also has people above him." Tan Xiu frowned and asked, "He has people above him? Who is it?" "Mu Jianhua of the Mu family in the imperial capital," answered Tang Han. "What?" exclaimed Tan Xiu. "What's wrong?" asked Tang Han, confused. "The Mu family may be quite powerful in the imperial capital, but I'm afraid it's much worse compared to our Tang family, no? You don't need to make such a fuss about it." Tan Xiu hesitated and forced a smile. "I won't make a fuss if it's just the Mu family. But the problem is... Sai, Mu Jianhua is my nominal future father-in-law." Tang Han was at a loss whether to cry or laugh. "You're really something, little brother. The dignified first beauty of the imperial capital, Mu Weining, was actually taken by you. But, you actually killed the son of the person who was under the protection of your future husband. I dare say that your future father-in-law will go all out against you if you kill Miao Hengfu." Tan Xiu was a bit helpless inwardly and forced a smile. "It won't go that far, right? It won't go that far?" asked Tang Han with a smile. "Mu Jianhua is just a good-for-nothing clansman in the eyes of the Mu family. Even if his father is the Mu family's patriarch, the position of the Mu family's patriarch will never be passed to him in the future. I presume you know something about your future father-in-law. The guy is simply... Let's put it this way. If you kill Miao Hengfu, it's tantamount to cutting off your father-in-law's biggest source of wealth. It's no wonder he won't go all out against you." "No, that's not right." Tan Xiu frowned and said, "If Mu Jianhua has a source of money like Miao Hengfu, how could he let his daughter give him money to plug the hole?" Tang Han was surprised, but she immediately said, "Perhaps you've underestimated your future father-in-law's extravagance. Let's not talk about other things. Just 3 years ago, I heard that Mu Jianhua lost more than 600 million yuan in Las Vegas." Holy shit! Tan Xiu was startled by Mu Jianhua's extravagance. Chapter 742. On the south side of the mountain in the center of Mist Source Island, members of the Reston organization were stationed in the east of a village of about 2,000 residents. The leader of the group was the ruthless second-in-command, Jinlei Duomo. Jinlei Duomo's background was very mysterious. Apart from the boss of the Reston organization, the mysterious strongest person, no one else knew about her past. At the age of 12, Jinlei Duomo drifted to Mexico, grew up in a drug den, and lived in a criminal paradise. She was very strong. So strong that all the members of the Reston organization were secretly afraid of her name. Even some gangs that were stronger than the Reston organization did not dare to provoke them. It was not because of the mysterious boss, but because of Jinlei Duomo's existence. The East. This was the place that Jinlei Duomo dreamed of coming to, but for a whole 20 years, she had never stepped into the territory of Huaxia. This was because she remembered the warning of the woman who helped her live until the age of 12 and taught her magical martial arts. Do not enter Huaxia with blood on your hands. This time, she finally made an exception and came to the east, but she believed that the existence of Mist Source Island was not considered Huaxia territory. On the one hand, she was instructed by the boss of the gang to come to Mist Source Island to seize the mineral resources and wealth. On the other hand, she still hoped to find traces of that woman here. Even if she could not see her, as long as she could find clues that she was still alive, that would be enough. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door, and the voice of her trusted subordinate came from outside. Boss, we found traces of a battle near the White Fog area south of the mountain. It's very strange, there are no traces of firearms being used. It's like a battle scene caused by cold weapons. Pa. Jinlei Duomo instantly appeared at the door. As the door opened and closed in an instant, her confidant was already in the room. A scene caused by cold weapons? Jinlei Duomo asked with a cold face. Her subordinate felt a chill in his heart. Even though he knew that Jinlei Duomo was very powerful and had terrifying strength that far exceeded normal humans, he was still afraid to be caught in the room in an instant. Suppressing the fear, he braced himself and said, "Yes, very shocking traces of a battle. It's like a scene caused by a powerful beast, but according to our judgment, it's not a beast, so it can only be the work of a human. No, there are other mutant races." "Be more specific," said Jinlei Duomo in a deep voice. "After our investigation, we found traces left behind by the legendary vampires, and the scene caused by an adept. Jean La had already gone over and should be back soon. She might be able to bring back a more comprehensive survey result," the subordinate said. Jinlei Duomo's eyes flashed with a cold light. She had fought with vampires and metahumans before. She knew that both vampires and mutants possessed terrifying strength. Of course, she also had 2 arcanists under her, and Jean La was one of them. "You go out first. After Jin La returns, tell her to come see me immediately." Night fell. Jinlei Duomo stood by the window on the second floor with a solemn expression, looking northwest. That's the direction where the traces of battle were left near the White Fog area in the south of the mountain, as reported by the subordinate. Suddenly, her expression changed slightly, and her figure instantly leaped out of the window. In the blink of an eye, she had already appeared in the vicinity of the village, which was a few hundred meters away. She looked at the 3 or 4 figures that were fleeing for their lives in a sorry state. Her body flickered and she appeared in front of them. "What's going on?" Jinlei Duomo looked at her 4 subordinates, who were covered with wounds and looked terrible. Her eyes seemed to be able to spit out fire, but she still suppressed it and asked in a deep voice. "Boss, it's the enemy. Our 10-man squad was patrolling nearby when we didn't expect to encounter a group of people. As a result, all 6 of our companions were killed by them," said one of the scarred middle-aged black men. Jinlei Duomo's complexion changed and she asked, "Who are they?" "The young man in the lead claims to be the only son of Mist Source Island's richest man, Miao Hengfu. Miao Wenlei. He's very insolent and arrogant, and his men are very strong. They immediately opened fire at the slightest disagreement," said the middle-aged black man. Jinlei Duomo's eyes turned cold and she said in a heavy tone, "The richest man in Mist Source Island? Tell me, which direction are they and where they should be now?" "They're behind us, southwest of where we're fleeing. I don't know where they are now, but we had a fight a few kilometers away, and it's only been 10 minutes. They shouldn't be far from there. Go back all of you." Jinlei Duomo gave her orders and instantly ran southwest. She didn't use her ghost-like movement skills in front of her subordinates, but once she was out of their sight, she immediately soared into the air and stepped on the tree branches with the tips of her feet, shuttling through the air. In the southwest of the village, the terrain was quite high and the view was excellent. Near a towering ancient tree, 6 corpses were lying there, 2 of which were riddled with bullets. Bastard! Junlei Duomo's eyelids twitched a few times. She fiercely stomped the ground, and cracks instantly spread out like a spider web. She had a lot of subordinates, so it didn't matter if some of them died. But those she brought to Miss Source Island were almost all her trusted subordinates, and it was not easy to train them. But now, 6 of them died and 4 were seriously injured. Such a loss made her feel a bit distressed. Junlei Duomo clenched her fists and was about to use the communication device to contact her subordinates in the station. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed. She inadvertently found a row of words carved on the forehead of one of her subordinates. Idiot, fuck your grandpa. Boom! Junlei Duomo turned around and fiercely punched the big tree next to her. The tree trunk that even 2 people couldn't wrap their arms around was broken by her punch and fell to the ground with a loud crash, splashing up a cloud of dust. Miao Wenlei. Miao Hengfu. Sometimes, wisdom was more terrifying than force. A few kilometers away, Yishir-san held an infrared high-powered telescope and stared at Junlei Duomo's angry expression. He just joked with Shueisha about whether Junlei Duomo would stomp her feet in anger when she came to the scene where her subordinates were killed. But the result was that Junlei Duomo just punched a towering ancient tree and knocked it down. She shouldn't be an ability user. She shouldn't be a vampire either. Yishir-san and Zaiden, who also held a telescope, spoke at the same time. After that, both of them fell into silence at the same time. After a long time, when Junlei Duomo's figure disappeared in the distance, Yishir-san said in a deep voice, "We must report this situation to boss. That woman is too powerful. Even we may not be able to compare with her. It'll be very troublesome if something goes wrong in the plan." Zaiden, who had always been confident and cautious, nodded and said, "We may not know much about Miao Hengfu's strength, but as long as he's still an ordinary person, he's absolutely no match for Junlei Duomo. A powerhouse like him can exterminate a large number of ordinary people. Doesn't boss want to use the Reston Mafia to uproot the Miao family's forces?" said Yishir-san. "You report the woman's situation to boss, and we'll proceed with the next plan immediately." "Understood." Wolfpack City. The Qingyuan group was located in the center of the city and occupied a large area. 5 4-story buildings formed a circle, surrounding a 3-story building in the middle. Between the 5 buildings and the 3-story building in the middle was a corridor in the air, just like 5 dragons holding a pearl. The top floor of the 3-story building was the private forbidden area of the Qingyuan group's chairman, Miao Hengfu, where even the company's top executives had no right to enter. This was Miao Hengfu's place of leisure and entertainment. The interior was extraordinarily luxurious with all kinds of entertainment facilities. Even many of the Qingyuan group's top executives were aware that there were at least 10 beautiful women on the 3rd floor, which was where Miao Hengfu's mistresses lived. Life must be enjoyed to the fullest. Don't let the golden goblet be empty facing the moon. Miao Hengfu especially admired this line of the poem and even vividly expressed the word, enjoy to the fullest. He was comfortably nestled on the soft sofa, enjoying the massage of a beautiful woman and tasting the grapes handed to him by another beautiful woman from time to time. His expression was indescribably lazy. Ring, ring, ring. The urgent ringtone of a cell phone suddenly sounded. Miao Hengfu didn't move. He didn't even lift his eyelids. Instead, it was the beautiful woman beside him who obediently took the phone and looked at the number on the screen. "It's an unfamiliar number." "Answer it." Miao Hengfu finally raised his eyelids and watched the beautiful woman pick up the phone. Just as he was about to speak, a hurried roar came from the other side. "Save me, boss. Damned Reston Mafia." After the shrill scream, there was no more sound coming from the other side of the phone. Miao Hengfu's expression greatly changed. He abruptly jumped up from the sofa and went downstairs with a gloomy face. He walked to the office on the 2nd floor and was immediately followed by 2 of the company's top executives. "Find out who this number belongs to." "Got it." One of the executives memorized the number and quickly left the office. However, a minute or 2 later, he hurriedly came back and reported, "I found out, boss. It's the private number of a security guard in our company's security team. He's also one of the members you listed as the Flame Squad. Where is he now? Asked Miao Hengfu in a deep voice. I just asked around and the news I got is that he went out with your son last night and hasn't returned yet, said the executive. Miao Hengfu's expression froze. Then, his pupils violently contracted and a horrified look burst out from his eyes. He immediately took the phone and dialed his son, Miao Wenlei's number, but no one answered. Something happened. Miao Hengfu's heart thumped and a bad premonition spontaneously rose in his heart. Chapter 743. He immediately shouted, "Find out Wenlei's whereabouts. His phone can still be reached. Contact the police and let them use communication equipment to locate Wenlei's private phone number. Also, immediately send people out to search for him. Remember, no matter what method you use, no matter what price you have to pay, you must find him in the shortest time possible." The senior executive hesitated and smiled bitterly. "Boss, the situation is special now. All of us have been infected. I'm afraid it's unrealistic to send people to search for him on a large scale. I think we should get all the members of our security team ready to go. Once the police find the location of young Master Miao's phone number, our people will immediately rush over." Miao Hengfu suddenly woke up. It was a very special time now. The entire Mist Source Island was infected with the darkening virus. Even if they had found a way to temporarily suppress the virus, it would not solve the root cause. Now that the entire Mist Source Island was in a state of panic, it was indeed unrealistic to send people to search for his son on a large scale. "Let's do as you say. However, send someone to the security team to understand the situation and ask who left with Wenlei. Ask if anyone knows where they went. Do it immediately." As the two senior executives of the company left, Miao Hengfu paced around the office with a gloomy face. He didn't believe that the company's security would ask for help for no reason. The members selected by him to join the Flame Squad were all people who had followed him to do some shameful things. They were also the thugs he had focused on training. Sure enough, soon, the investigation results were sent to Miao Hengfu. A total of 7 people left with his son last night. All of them were members of the Flame Squad. Including his son, there were 8 people in total. After eating and drinking at the Big Billionaire Entertainment Club last night, they left this morning. Miao Hengfu looked at the road surveillance video sent by the traffic police. What made him furious was that his good-for-nothing son actually tied a little girl to the roof of the car, and then drove at an extremely fast speed along the road in the center of the city, in the direction of the mountain in the center. "Guochang, take some people to look for him." Miao Hengfu called the leader of the Flame Squad, who was also his trusted thug. Tang Manor Martial Arts School. Tan Xiao had already received Bullet's report, and when he heard that Reston's Zhenlei Duomo was actually a master, his interest was immediately piqued. After all, Zidane and Yi Shisan were all cultivators, and they had already reached the foundation establishment stage. Even they were ashamed of their strength. Tan Xiao was curious about Zhenlei Duomo's identity. "You want to go yourself?" Tang Han asked hesitantly. Tan Xiao nodded and said, "I'm indeed interested in seeing the situation there." After all, it was not normal for a foreign gangster to have such power. "Sister, wait for my news at Tang Manor Martial Arts School. This time, I'm not just targeting Miao Hengfu and Reston's organization. I've also targeted 2 more powerful forces. As long as the plot goes according to my plan, many of the crises on Mist Source Island can be solved." "I'll go with you," Tang Han said. "Although I haven't reached the Martial Dao Grandmaster realm yet, I'm only a step away from it. Also, I'll bring a group of experts with me in case of emergencies." "I know what you're thinking, sister." Tan Xiao waved his hand. "But Grandpa sent me here, which proves that I have the ability to solve these problems. Don't worry. There are only a few experts on the entire Mist Source Island who can make me dread them. The reason why I use some schemes and tricks is that I'm too lazy to do it myself. Also, the Tang Manor Martial Arts School is the backup plan of our Tang family on Mist Source Island. If it's not necessary to be exposed, then keep a low profile and continue hiding." Tang Han hesitated for a moment before she finally nodded and said, "All right then." But pay attention to your safety. As long as there's life, there's hope. Don't put yourself in danger. I know what I'm doing, Tan Xiu replied and then drove away from Tang Manor Martial Arts School alone. Late at night, he met up with Yi Shisan and Zidane in the mountain forest more than 10 kilometers north of Mixed Summit City. How come it's only you two? Where are the others? They all went to inquire about the news. We may have already laid out the layout, but we still need to pay attention to the plot, said Yi Shisan respectfully. We can adjust the plan or add fuel to the fire if any accident happens midway. I'm at ease with you handling the matter, said Tan Xiu with a smile. Anyways, what's the situation with that surnamed Miao? Zhang Ju is in charge of keeping an eye on them. He sent me the news 2 hours and 15 minutes ago, said Yi Shisan. Miao Hengfu's henchman, Guochang, has led dozens of Qingyuan Group security guards to rush to the place where we killed Miao Wenlei overnight. Black Bear also sent me the news. Be it Miao Wenlei's mobile phone or the other 7 people's mobile phones, all of them have been receiving calls. Black Bear picked up a mobile phone and only connected for 3 or 4 minutes, but it should be enough time. Tan Xiu squinted his eyes and asked, You mean satellite positioning? Did someone from the Public Security Bureau or the Traffic Police get involved? Zidane has invaded the network and confirmed that the Traffic Police are involved. Yi Shisan nodded. The people from the Wolfpack City's Public Security Bureau have already gathered, but they suddenly disbanded for some unknown reason. Tan Xiu nodded and sneered. Miao Hengfu can become the richest local tycoon in Miss Source Island, so he must have a lot of connections. It's normal for him to be able to influence the Public Security Bureau. Just wait. We'll watch a good show. Boss, we may have dug a pit for the Stygian Club and those elementalists to jump, but we can't monitor them in secret. We can't adjust the plan in time if something goes wrong on both sides. Yi Shisan hesitated. All has found out that those elementalists belong to the world's largest organization, the Pyramid, said Tan Xiu with a smile. The Stygian Club and the Pyramid have always been fighting openly and covertly, with constant friction between them. This time, we're going to frame the Stygian Club for the deaths of those elementalists, so they will definitely tear off all pretense of cordiality. What I'm concerned about now is how bad the losses will be for both sides. On this night, more than a dozen foreign forces in the entire Mist Source Island were in a state of panic. The reason was that dozens of powerhouses from the Pyramid organization had first attacked the Stygian Club station in Mist Source Island. 4 werewolves and a vampire viscount were silently killed and their corpses were taken away. Subsequently, more than a dozen other foreign forces also suffered sneak attacks, with 2 organizations suffering heavy losses. The traces left at the scene of the battle were either werewolf corpses or vampire body parts without exception. In short, all the spearheads pointed at the Stygian Club. Early in the morning, the first ray of sunlight rose from the east, illuminating the entire Mist Source Island. At the Qingyuan Group's HQ, Miao Hengfu received the news that Miao Wenlei and the 7 company security guards were all killed. Not only that, but the enemy also left an extremely arrogant slogan. Not only did they admit that it was the Reston organization, but they also left a slogan to destroy Miao Hengfu and the Qingyuan Group. Assemble! Miao Hengfu flew into a rage and ordered the security forces and his own private armed forces to assemble immediately. Even a batch of firearms that he had secretly bought had been distributed. However, dozens of cars rushed to the place where Miao Wenlei's body was dumped, led by Miao Hengfu himself. However, when the convoy just left the Wolfpack City for a dozen kilometers, they were ambushed by dozens of armed forces. In just a few minutes, Miao Hengfu's men suffered heavy losses. A few kilometers away, Tan Xiu was holding a pair of binoculars as he watched the fierce battle taking place on the road at the foot of the mountain with a satisfied smile on his handsome face. The battle was fierce, but most of the people killed were Miao Hengfu's men, while Reston's men suffered minimal losses. She's here. Tan Xiu's expression suddenly changed. Through the binoculars, he clearly saw a woman carrying a long blade on her back instantly appearing in the convoy. She was like a grim reaper, reaping lives after the long blade was unsheathed. In just half a minute, the remaining 40 to 50 people were all killed, including Miao Hengfu. The show's over. Time to go. Tan Xiu put down the binoculars and handed it to Yi Shisan beside him with a smile. Boss, you never miss anything. You can solve a lot of trouble with just a simple scheme. You're really amazing. Yi Shisan smiled. Don't flatter me, Tan Xiu said with a smile. Just as he took a step forward, his expression suddenly changed, and a sharp light burst out from his eyes. Go back. He instantly unleashed the long sword in his dantian space, and a blade light that was tens of meters long slashed down the hillside like a dazzling waterfall. More than a dozen trees were split into pieces, and a long ditch that was tens of meters long and half a meter deep was left on the ground. Then, a lightning-like black shadow sprang out from the violent blade shadows. An enemy? Yi Shisan and Zidane unleashed their flying swords at the same time, and their figures were as fast as lightning as they shot toward the black shadow. In just a few seconds, they had already appeared on both sides of the figure. Stop! Tan Xiu followed closely behind and shouted before Yi Shisan and Zidane launched their attacks. That figure was Zhenlei Duomo. When she killed dozens of people, she had already noticed that someone was hiding in the dark and watching them. She hadn't found the figure of the person who was watching them, but just as Tan Xiu and the other two left, she finally noticed something unusual. She didn't expect that she would be greeted by a thunderous sword strike. Who are you? Zhenlei Duomo looked a bit embarrassed as she angrily shouted with a long saber in her hand. She was shocked because she would have been directly killed by that thunderous sword strike if she hadn't dodged fast enough. Tan Xiu slightly furrowed his brows. He had thought of several identities of Zhenlei Duomo, but he never expected that she turned out to be a cultivator. Moreover, her cultivation was very high, and she was only a step away from the golden core stage. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "A foreign woman, especially the female leader of a foreign gang, turns out to be a cultivator. It's really inconceivable." Chapter 744. At this moment, Zhenlei Duomo had already guessed Tan Xiu's identity. She was pleasantly surprised, but her expression was indescribably complicated. One of the reasons she came to Mist Source Island was to understand the situation of the mysterious Eastern country's cultivators. It would be best if she could inquire about the woman who had raised and taught her. Do you know my identity? Zhenlei Duomo looked at Tan Xiu with vigilance and asked. You're the famous Mexican mafia's second-in-command, the rumored demoness with both wisdom and strength. How could I not know you? Tan Xiu said with a smile. It's just that I didn't expect to meet you on this Mist Source Island. It seems that there are many people who covet the resources of Huaxia. Since you know me, then please tell me who you are, said Zhenlei Duomo coldly. Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu said lightly. Zhenlei Duomo wasn't satisfied. A name meant nothing to her. What she wanted to know was Tan Xiu's identity. Moreover, she realized that this guy named Tan Xiu definitely didn't appear here by chance. You schemed against me? Tan Xiu let out a hollow laugh. He indeed schemed against Zhenlei Duomo, but Miao Wenlei and Miao Hengfu had long been dead. The dead could not tell the truth, so he naturally didn't want to admit it. Furthermore, he also felt a bit regretful. Miao Hengfu was strong in appearance but weak in reality. He didn't even have a martial arts grandmaster under him, so he couldn't bring any losses to the Reston Mafia. Otherwise, he could have killed two birds with one stone and solved more troubles. Zhenlei Duomo, I don't know what you mean by that. We just happened to pass by and didn't expect to see such a good show. However, I would like to ask you, who gave you the guts to kill a citizen of Huaxia in our territory? How could those trash kill so many of my men near my camp? Zhenlei Duomo angrily said. Do all the Chinese like to play the fool? Ring, 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 Tan Xiu's communicators suddenly rang. Under the angry gaze of Zhenlei Duomo, he answered the phone and said, What's the matter? Half a minute later, Tan Xiu's expression turned strange. He grunted and hung up the call. Then, he looked at Zhenlei Duomo with a faint smile and said, All right. I admit that I sent people to do this, but I did it out of goodwill. It was all for your own good, for the good of your Reston Mafia. Jinlei Duomo angrily shouted. You killed my men and said it was for my own good? What nonsense are you talking about? If my guess is correct, you still don't know what happened in the village where you were stationed before, said Tan Xiao with a straight face. Similarly, I guess you haven't received the news about what happened to the dozen or so foreign forces last night. But what I can tell you is that using the lives of some ordinary people to help you and save the Reston organization from disaster, this is a kindness to you. In other words, I'm your savior. What is it? Jinlei Duomo was stunned. She looked at the serious expression on Tan Xiao's face and couldn't wrap her head around it. Since he admitted that he was plotting against her, how did he suddenly become her savior? She had lost 6 of her men. Are you spouting nonsense? Or are you deliberately teasing me? Tan Xiao sneered. It seems that your Reston organization's intel is really bad. Let me tell you something. Last night, the 3rd most dangerous organization in the world, the Stygian Club, attacked more than a dozen foreign forces. Some of the weaker forces were almost uprooted. The world's largest organization, Pyramid, launched a fierce counterattack against the Stygian Club. The other 2 forces that were stationed in the village at the same time as you also suffered a lot of losses. I picked your Reston organization and let you leave there temporarily to avoid being attacked, right? What? The Stygian Club? Jinlei Duomo's expression drastically changed and a deep dread could be seen in her eyes. As a cultivator, she naturally knew some inside stories that ordinary people didn't know. But how dare the Stygian Club? If my guess is correct, the foreign forces in the entire Mist Source Island have begun to secretly unite. Tan Xiao sneered. The Stygian Club is too ambitious, and it's like poking the hornet's nest this time. Next will be a life-and-death struggle between the various forces and the Stygian Club. But I pulled your Reston organization out of this mess. Don't tell me I'm wrong? Jinlei Duomo felt that Tan Xiao was twisting words and forcing logic, but she couldn't refute him. If what he said was true, then she was really lucky. After all, the Stygian Club was a terrifying force that the Reston organization she belonged to couldn't be compared to. To be precise, even 100 Reston organizations couldn't compare to the Stygian Club's terrifying power. Jinlei Duomo took a deep breath and slowly said, Mr. Tang, I haven't received any news about what you said yet. Since we're not enemies, I have no intention of becoming enemies with the Chinese cultivators. Then, I hope we won't be enemies in the future. One more enemy is better than one more friend. Tan Xiao smiled indifferently. If you're willing to leave Mist Source Island with the Reston organization's people, I guarantee we won't be enemies. Jinlei Duomo frowned and said, whether our Reston organization's people leave Mist Source Island or not has nothing to do with you, Mr. Tang. Don't tell me you can represent the Chinese government? Tang Xiao directly took out the green book, flashed it and said, unfortunately, I can indeed represent the Chinese government. Having this thing is equivalent to having official rights. I personally brought some people to Mist Source Island to solve the problem here. I can tell you that all the foreign forces will become the enemies of our country if they continue to stay on Mist Source Island. They're also my enemies. A cold glint flashed in Jinlei Duomo's eyes, but she still instantly restrained her aura. She seriously observed Tan Xiao a few times and finally slowly said, you can leave Mist Source Island if you can answer a question of mine and I'm satisfied with the answer. Say it. Tan Xiao could see that Jinlei Duomo was unwilling, but he knew that she wouldn't dare to be his enemy. Mr. Tang may represent the Chinese government, but you're a cultivator after all. You should know about the Chinese cultivation world, right? Asked Jinlei Duomo. I want to ask you about someone who's also a cultivator. Who is it? Asked Tan Xiao in astonishment. I'm not particularly clear about her situation. Jinlei Duomo frowned. I only know that her name is Yen. She was in her 20s 20 years ago, but she should be in her 40s or 50s now. 40 or 50s? Yen? I'm sorry, I've never heard of this person. Tan Xiao shook his head. A disappointed look appeared in Jinlei Duomo's eyes as she bitterly said, since Mr. Tang doesn't know, then I can only consult other cultivators in China. To tell you the truth, She supported me when I was growing up and later taught me a cultivation technique. But I lost contact with her many years ago. I've never heard of this person you mentioned. Tan Xiu nodded lightly. I don't know much about the situation in China's cultivation world. Many cultivators live incognito or hide in famous mountains and rivers. Unless they want to, it's very difficult for others to know their existence. Zhenlei Duomo didn't want to spend more time with Tan Xiu. Since she couldn't get the information she wanted, she immediately cupped her fists and said, "If that's the case, then I'll take my leave." Tan Xiu didn't stop her. He watched her leave and was about to call Zidane and Yi Shisan to leave. Suddenly, Zidane came to Tan Xiu's side and whispered, "Boss, you seem to have forgotten someone." "Who is it?" asked Tan Xiu, puzzled. "The founder of the Everlasting Feast Hall, the former big boss," said Zidane. "Gu Yan'er?" Tan Xiu stared blankly and his expression slightly changed. His precious disciple should be in her 20s more than 20 years ago, and her name also had the word yen in it. Could there be some connection between them? Go and call her back. Tan Xiu directly sat cross-legged and took out a pen and paper from his interspatial ring. Just as he was about to draw Gu Yan'er's portrait, he suddenly recalled something and patted his forehead. He took out his mobile phone, opened the photo album, and selected Gu Yan'er's photo. A minute later, Zhenlei Duomo stood in front of Tan Xiu with a vigilant face. "Is there anything else?" Zhenlei Duomo was afraid of Tan Xiu, but she wasn't afraid of him. She knew very well that she was not Tan Xiu's opponent, but he wouldn't be able to stop her if she wanted to escape. Tan Xiu handed over his mobile phone and lightly said, "Look at this photo. Is it this woman?" Zhenlei Duomo took the mobile phone with a confused look. When her eyes fell on the photo, her pupils suddenly contracted and her body violently trembled a few times. "Yes, it's her." Zhenlei Duomo's voice was a bit trembling. She clearly remembered this face. It was the face that was deeply engraved in her heart. She was so beautiful and unparalleled in the past, and she was so cold and elegant. She didn't know what was holy and pure before, but she understood the meaning of the word holy and pure the first time she saw her. Tan Xiu raised his hand to touch the bridge of his nose and secretly smiled wryly inside. He knew that Gu Yan'er's footprints had been to every corner of the earth, but he didn't expect that she had left such a legacy in Mexico. "Why are you looking for her?" Tan Xiu was silent for a moment and then slowly asked. Zhenlei Duomo reluctantly moved her eyes away from the photo and said with an irrepressible excitement, "She's my benefactor, my master, and half a mother to me. I made a mistake in front of her that year. I shouldn't have killed a bad guy, so she left and didn't allow me to step into China. I miss her." Upon hearing this, Tan Xiu stared blankly and immediately guessed Gu Yan'er's thoughts in the past. She would never despise Zhenlei Duomo for killing someone, because who didn't have hands stained with blood from the immortal world? Perhaps it was because of her body at that time. Chapter 745. Tan Xiu quietly observed Zhenlei Duomo. He could sense her emotional fluctuations and the intense longing she had for Gu Yan. Speaking of which, the core experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall were very lucky. At least, they were luckier than Zhenlei Duomo since they had the Everlasting Feast Hall as their home. Zhenlei Duomo, on the other hand, was like a lonely ghost who had been wandering outside for so many years. Tan Xiu's eyes then fell on Zidane and Yi Shisan's faces. Sure enough, they looked at Zhenlei Duomo with softer eyes than before. "Zhenlei Duomo, do you want to see Yenna?" Zhenlei Duomo's spirit shook and she hurriedly asked, "Can I see her? Do you know her whereabouts?" "Of course I know her whereabouts." Tan Xiu nodded and said, "As for whether you can see her or not, it depends on your performance." "How do you want me to perform?" asked Zhenlei Duomo quickly. "I can let your rest and organization stay in Mist Source Island for the time being," said Tan Xiu. "But you must obey my orders while you're on Mist Source Island. Of course, I can also guarantee your safety on Mist Source Island. I can guarantee your safety even if it's the Stygian Club and Pyramid." Zhenlei Duomo shot a deep look at Tan Xiu. A contemptuous look gradually appeared in her eyes as she shook her head and said, You don't know how terrifying the Stygian Club and Pyramid are. If I were you, I'd never dare to talk big like that. Tan Xiu grinned and said, there's an idiom in Huaxia that says a frog at the bottom of a well. Even if you know some secrets in this world, it's just a superficial understanding. I, Tan Xiu, don't like to talk big, but you can see if I can protect you or not. Why should I believe you? Asked Xinlei Duomo cautiously after hesitating for a long time. Because you have no choice at all, said Tan Xiu lightly. If you want to stay on Miss Source Island and see Yen, you can only choose to believe me. Also, you don't have to worry about me plotting against you because if I wanted to kill you, you would already be a corpse by now. Xinlei Duomo was smart. Looking at Tan Xiu's confident expression, she asked after a moment of silence, what do you want me to do? I need you to help me kill the Stygian Club, the Pyramid, and dozens of other forces, or drive them out of Miss Source Island, said Tan Xiu decisively. Solve the problem of Miss Source Island, and I can take you to see Yen Air. Xinlei Duomo's pupils shrank. She suddenly realized that this young man named Tan Xiu was not as simple as she had imagined. At the very least, the power he had was not limited to just him and his two subordinates. Xinlei Duomo took a deep breath and asked, one last question. What is your relationship with her? Yi San, who was standing at the side, was angry because Xinlei Duomo didn't answer Tan Xiu for a long time. At this moment he finally couldn't help but step forward and shout in a deep voice, Xinlei Duomo, you ask too many questions. Boss already thinks highly of you by answering your previous questions. Now answer boss. Are you willing to work for boss in Miss Source Island? You, Xinlei Duomo furrowed her brows. Yi San waved his hand to interrupt her and sternly shouted, I'm warning you, this is your only chance to go home. If you don't cherish it, you can only continue to be a wandering ghost abroad and fend for yourself. The chance to go home? Xinlei Duomo was shocked and seemed to realize something in a flash. She looked at Tan Xiu in disbelief before shifting her eyes to Yi San and Zidane. Countless thoughts churned in her mind. Finally, she gritted her teeth and said, I promise you, but I can choose to refuse if your request is too much. Tan Xiu smiled indifferently and said, First of all, disperse your Reston men. I don't need them as armed forces to fight with other forces, but I hope they can serve as intelligence personnel to understand the movements of other forces on Mist Source Island and report back to me in time. You're very powerful, so you can stay with me. Xinlei Duomo pondered for a moment and slowly nodded. I'll give the order right away. Tan Xiu stopped her and ordered, Remember, tell your men to behave themselves and don't do anything outrageous on Miss Source Island. This place belongs to China, and I'm responsible for solving the crisis on Miss Source Island, so I don't want your men to make trouble for me. Understood. Xinlei Duomo replied and instantly rushed toward her men in the distance. Zidane, who stood beside Tan Xiu, retracted her gaze from Xinlei Duomo's back and asked in a low voice, Boss, do you want to recruit her into our everlasting feast hall? Tan Xiu sighed. She has some relationship with Yen, after all. It's worth considering if she's not a bad person. Let's observe first. The problem on Miss Source Island is very serious. Those foreign forces are like hungry wolves, eyeing the resources of Mist Source Island and trying to threaten the Chinese government. But we don't have much time, and I still have to participate in the research of the darkening virus antidote, so we must cut the Gordian knot quickly. What should we do next? Asked Zidane. Xinlei Duomo has killed Miao Hengfu, so one of our hidden dangers has been eliminated, said Tan Xiu. The next step is to deal with those foreign forces. Let them kill each other, and we'll clean up the mess when most of them are dead. In the northern suburbs of Mixed Summit City, the Stygian Club's camp had been moved here because it was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, so Keithmore considered this place to be hidden. The Pyramid Elementalists seemed to have gone crazy and launched several attacks on them in succession, causing the 2 Spectre squads he recruited to suffer heavy losses. Even Basil and Ality were badly injured. Have you investigated it? Keithmore's eyes turned cold as he stared at the young man in front of him. I've investigated it thoroughly. The young man nodded. The attacks on the various forces last night were actually done by the pyramid's people. Our people were killed and their corpses were used to frame us. Now, those forces have joined forces. On one hand, they are keeping a distance from the pyramid, while on the other hand, they are planning to attack us. Don't tell me they don't understand that this is all a conspiracy of the pyramid? Keith more angrily shouted. No one is a fool since they can hold such power. The young man forced a smile. Yet they are still preparing to attack us, which means that our existence is a threat to them. Though they know that this is a conspiracy of the pyramid, the attack on them gives them an opportunity to unite and contend with us. Those people are ambitious, they want more resources and benefits. Keith Moore sneered and immediately asked, "What about the pyramid's people?" "They're only about 30 kilometers away from us now," answered the young man. "They're stationed in the eastern mountains." After their investigation, they found that the number of people in the pyramid is far more than what we've investigated before. Furthermore, we also found that one of the pyramid's war elders, Bodit, has arrived. Ghoul war elder, Bodit? Keith Moore's eyes turned cold and intense killing intent burst out from him. He had some dealings with most of the pyramid's war elders, and this ghoul war elder, Bodit, had a deep grudge against him. Arrange the blood array and blood poison. Keith Moore uttered those words through gritted teeth. The young man's expression changed and he hurriedly said, "Sir, once we arrange the blood array, we'll really have to fight them to the death." Slap! Keith Moore slapped the young man and angrily shouted, "Idiot! We're now in a situation where we have to fight them to the death. Go and tell them to get ready. Since they want to get rid of us, then we'll kill them first." Understood. The young man looked fearful and quickly crawled up from the ground and rushed out of the tent as though he was fleeing for his life. In the evening, Tan Xiao, Dan Dan Yishur San, and Junlei Duomo quietly appeared in the eastern part of Mixed Summit City. After the four of them investigated, they found that all forces were stationed here. Whoosh! A ghost-like figure appeared nearby without a sound. Junlei Duomo instantly pulled out her long saber and instantly locked the person with a dense killing intent. Don't! Tan Xiao immediately stopped Junlei Duomo. He looked at Jin Shi, who appeared in front of him lightning fast, and asked, "What's the situation?" Jin Shi indifferently glanced at Junlei Duomo and respectfully reported, "Boss, Pyramid's people are stationed in the northwest of Mixed Summit City. We've investigated and determined that they have a total of 62 people. Further, we've also investigated that the leader of Pyramid is called Wu Jia, the Wisdom War Elder." Tan Xiao nodded and sneered. "The Pyramid's War Elder? They really value Miss Source Island, to think that even such a big shot has appeared. It's not only the Wisdom War Elder, Wu Jia, but also the Ghoul War Elder, Bodit," said Jin Shi with a solemn expression. "It was Bodit and his men who attacked the Stygian Club last night." "Yeah," Tan Xiao replied. He turned to look at Junlei Duomo and calmly said, "Don't make a fuss about someone appearing here. Jin Shi is my man, and our men will arrive soon." Junlei Duomo was a bit shocked. She didn't expect that Tan Xiao had so many cultivators under him. Furthermore, the strength of this guy who just arrived was not to be underestimated. At this moment, she was curious about the number of men Tan Xiao had. From Tan Xiao's words, it seemed that there should be a few more, right? 2 hours later, Junlei Duomo looked at the 9 men of Tan Xiao in front of her and was shocked to the point that it was hard to be more shocked. 9 expert martial cultivators. To be able to control such a powerful force, no matter where they went, they would be a terrifying force, and they would be able to occupy a large territory. Chapter 746. In the dense mountain forest, Mo Au and Shui Gui were like ghosts in the night as they approached Tan Xiao's position at lightning speed. It didn't take long for the duo to appear in front of Tan Xiao. "Ha!" Shui Gui suddenly furrowed his brows. When he saw Junlei Duomo standing next to Tang Xiao, a fierce killing intent instantly erupted from his body. He instantly unleashed his flying sword and fiercely slashed it toward Junlei Duomo. Tang Xiao's complexion slightly changed. He flickered and appeared in front of Junlei Duomo lightning fast and unleashed his sword to block Shui Gui's strike. As he took a step back, he angrily shouted, "Shui Gui, stop!" Shui Gui didn't realize what it meant for Junlei Duomo to stand next to Tan Xiu. His expression slightly changed when he saw his boss blocking his attack. He instantly retracted his flying sword, but still shot a murderous look at Junlei Duomo. "What's going on?" Tan Xiu frowned and asked. "It turns out to be Shui Gui." Junlei Duomo sneered. "I didn't expect that your strength would improve so much after 7 years. What's wrong? Do you still want to avenge your water snake brother?" Whoosh! Aside from Timol, the other 9 instantly unleashed their flying swords and glared at Junlei Duomo with killing intent. The sudden change made Junlei Duomo's expression slightly change, and she instantly retreated half a step. "Answer my question, Shui Gui." Tan Xiu frowned and asked in a deep voice. Shui Gui was loyal to Tan Xiu and could sense the anger in Tan Xiu's tone. He quickly lowered his head and said, "Boss, I once had a younger brother called Water Snake. He used to be a core member of our everlasting feast hall. 7.5 years ago, we 2 brothers were on a mission abroad and met this woman. Her appearance didn't change much, so I'm 100% sure it's her. She killed my brother and seriously injured me, causing me to fall off a cliff and be trapped for several days, almost dying in a foreign country. I've been trying to find her all these years, but I didn't expect that she would appear here." Tan Xiu turned to look at Junlei Duomo and asked in a deep voice, "You killed his brother?" Junlei Duomo bluntly said, "We're in different camps, and each has its own master. In order to steal information and assassinate my employer, you 2 brothers have used many despicable methods. Yes, I killed the water snake, but if I didn't kill him, I would be the one who died. Come to think of it, that battle was caused by you guys. As for me, it can only be considered a counterattack." Although Shui Gui knew that what Junlei Duomo said made sense, the one who died was still his younger brother. This hatred had been buried in his heart for many years, and he couldn't let it go. Tan Xiu had a headache. He didn't expect to encounter such a situation. However, he was biased towards Junlei Duomo. Back then, they had fought to the death for their respective masters. It was either you die or I die. But, hatred. How to solve it? Tan Xiu took a deep breath, waved his hand and said, "Shui Gui, you can talk about the enmity between you 2 after solving the matter on Miss Source Island. But I can tell you in advance that Junlei Duomo is the same as you. Yen-Er gave her grace when you were young. I'll personally take you back to Jingmen Island after solving the matter here. You can ask Yen-Er about how to solve the enmity between you 2. After saying that, his eyes then shifted to the others and lightly said, "Put away your weapons. If you want to kill someone, then get rid of those foreign forces first." Jin Shi and the others took back their flying swords. Shui Gui hesitated for a moment before he also released his flying sword into his body. He didn't dare to disobey Tan Xiu's order, but he secretly made up his mind to make Junlei Duomo pay the price after the matter on Mist Source Island was solved. Tan Xiu looked at Mo and asked, "What news did you get from your side?" Mo took out a map and respectfully said, "There's been some changes in the Stygian Club's camp. After our investigation, we found that the Stygian Club's people are arranging a very strange array. We've marked the location. It's on the only road to enter the Stygian Club's camp." Tan Xiu took the map and looked at it a few times. He then nodded and said, "Since the Stygian Club can become the 3rd largest foreign force, they definitely have some unknown cards up their sleeves. Our purpose this time is very simple. We want them to kill each other and both sides will suffer. The only thing we need to guard against now is the Pyramid's people. Alright, let's go and watch the tigers fight." In the northern suburbs of Mixed Summit City, Tan Xiu quietly arrived with Mo and the others and circled to the mountain northwest of the Stygian Club's camp from another direction. After searching for a good location, Tan Xiu then quietly arranged a concealment array. "We'll set up camp here and wait for those ambitious people to kill each other." "Don't we have to add fuel to the fire in the dark, boss?" asked Mo. "Of course we have to add fuel to the fire." Tan Xiu sneered. "But I'll handle this myself. All of you stay here." "Oh, Do you still have those vampire corpses? Mo took out the broken wing from his interspatial ring and said, only these. Tang Xiu nodded with satisfaction and said, that's enough. You stay here and wait. You stay here and wait. Having said that, he suddenly realized something and his eyes swept over Shuai and Jinlei Duomo. Then he indifferently said, remember my words. Put down your grudges for the time being and wait until we return to Jingmen Island. I'll severely punish any of you if you dare to act in private. Understood. Understood. Shuai and Jinlei Duomo glared at each other and obediently complied. In the mountain forest tens of kilometers east of Mixed Summit City, dozens of tents were set up in a mess, with many heavily armed men vigilantly patrolling the surrounding environment. In one of the tents, more than a dozen leaders of various forces were gathered and quarreling with each other with flushed faces. I suggest we don't rush to act first. Let's make sure that all the members of the Stygian Club on Mist Source Island won't be able to escape even if they have wings. Then we'll encircle and annihilate all those divergent races of the Stygian Club, said a burly black man. In the face of absolute power, all conspiracies and tricks are like clay chickens and pottery dogs that can't withstand a single blow. We have more than a dozen forces, and there's no lack of real experts among them. Also, even if those divergent races are very powerful, we still have a lot of firepower support. None of them will be able to escape. That's why I suggest we launch a direct attack, shouted another white man in a deep voice. I think we'd better wait. It's best if we can act together with the pyramid. Else, the pyramid will take advantage of us once we and the Stygian Club suffer heavy losses. That's right. The pyramid's people are eyeing us covetously. They're also full of hatred toward the Stygian Club. We'll have stronger power if we join forces. In case the pyramid's people turn against us at the last minute, it'll only increase unforeseen events. I think we shouldn't go with them. In the chaotic scene, everyone wanted to decide according to their own ideas. For a time, the whole situation fell into a deadlock. A few kilometers away, Tan Xiu was like a ghost in the dark as he quietly approached two foreign men with guns. At the moment when the two of them were unaware, a sharp dagger tore open their throats and killed them immediately. Then he continued to wander around the periphery, constantly hunting and killing the forces on the periphery. 12. After Tan Xiu felt that it was about time, he deliberately made a little noise and threw a dozen feathers from the vampire's wings next to the corpses before he directly left. Bang bang, bang, bullets whizzed out as 7 or 8 armed men on guard fired in the direction where Tan Xiu left and then hurriedly chased after him. Unfortunately, although their speed was fast, there was still a huge gap between them and Tan Xiu. They stopped chasing after him after they arrived near the corpses of the 2 dead armed men. The feather? One of them, a middle-aged man with a high status, picked up the feather and looked at it. The killing intent in his eyes turned more intense, and he rushed to the tent area almost without hesitation. What's the matter? More than a dozen leaders of various forces rushed out of the tent as the burly black man asked aloud. The middle-aged man came to the front of everyone and took out more than a dozen feathers in his hand. Then he quickly said, "Our men on guard duty in the periphery were sneakily attacked. We've just confirmed the number of people killed. There are a total of 12. I found these feathers next to the corpses of our men. They should be the feathers of a vampire. Bastards! They're going too far. They're too arrogant. Kill them, revenge." The leaders of the various forces had a drastic change in expression as they roared furiously. They thought that the Stygian Club's people were like rats now, hiding and not daring to come out. Never did they expect that the Stygian Club's people would be so arrogant as to sneak attack their men in the dark. There was no consensus at first, but a consensus was reached in just a few minutes. Tomorrow morning, they would immediately take action and kill all the Stygian Club's members on Mist Source Island at all costs. After returning to the concealment array, Tan Xiu observed the situation on the Stygian Club's side through a high-powered telescope. Then he sat cross-legged on a bluestone and looked at the dozens of people asking, "If my guess is correct, those forces won't be a match for the Stygian Club even if they join forces." If the Stygian Club's members don't suffer too many losses in the next battle, I'm afraid the pyramid won't directly take action. Can anyone think of a way to get the pyramid's people to participate in this? I have a way to deal with the pyramid's people, said Junlei Duomo all of a sudden. I don't need the pyramid's people to get involved. Tell me quickly. What's the way? Tan Xiu's spirit shook and he quickly asked. Chapter 747. A chilling glint flashed in Junlei Duomo's eyes as she slowly said, I carry a very terrifying laxative with me. As long as we can sneak this laxative into the meals of the Stygian Club's members, we can make them suffer from abdominal pain and crazily defecate. When the two sides fight, even if the Stygian Club's members try their best to fight back, it will greatly affect them and cause them to suffer huge losses. Laxative? Will this laxative be useful to the divergent races? Asked Tan Xiu with a frown. Absolutely. Junlei Duomo nodded and said, This laxative I got is very powerful. Even I will be affected if I take it, let alone those divergent races. As a matter of fact, I once fought a vampire marquis a few years ago, but I was defeated by him. To wash away my shame, I found that mysterious poison master and asked him to concoct this laxative for me. Later on, that vampire marquis almost had his intestines pulled out. In the end, I killed him directly even though I was weaker than him. It's indeed a good method, but the taste of the food doesn't taste right. I'm afraid those divergent races will easily notice it, said Tan Xiu. The laxative I got won't, said Junlei Duomo proudly. It's colorless and tasteless, so it won't be noticed even if it's mixed into the food. Tan Xiu thought for a moment before he nodded and said, All? Go to the southeast and find out when those forces started to attack the Stygian Club's people. Junlei Duomo, I need you to sneak into the Stygian Club's encampment and immediately put the laxative in their meals after receiving my message. Understood. Understood. Ao and Junlei Duomo complied and left at an extremely fast speed. The next morning, when the red sun rose from the east, half of the sky illuminated Mist Source Island, making it look magnificent as though a gorgeous coat was draped over it. The total number of people from more than a dozen forces totaled more than 560 people as they aggressively stormed toward the Stygian Club's encampment. Near them, there were more than 20 experts who were very powerful and could no longer be considered ordinary humans. They quickly cleared the obstacles on the road and covered the large group of people as they entered the canyon. Half an hour ago, Junlei Duomo had secretly put laxatives in the food of the Stygian Club's members. After half an hour of brewing, dozens of Stygian Club members felt a stomachache and severe diarrhea. Fighting. It could be triggered at any moment. As the most powerful man in the Stygian Club, Keith Moore was also flustered by this sudden change. Nearly 600 people from the Allied forces charged into the canyon and charged through the array formation, launching fierce attacks one after another. On the northwest hillside, Tan Xiu watched the battle below with great interest. What he found very interesting was that the Stygian Club had a lot of experts. Not only were there a lot of vampires, werewolves, wingmen, and other beastmen, but facing the enemy's attack, they could only endure the diarrhea and launch a counterattack. It was carried out amidst the splattering of blood and continued amidst the howls of pain. In another direction, the pyramid's wisdom war elder, Wu Jie, had been waiting for a long time with dozens of experts from the pyramid. They didn't expect that the Stygian Club's experts would suffer from massive diarrhea. Wu Jie, who wanted to be the fisherman who benefited from the fight between the fish and the clam, was stimulated by such a good thing. Get ready to join the battle at any time. Wu Jie glanced at Bodit, who was standing straight next to him, and smilingly said while stroking his beard. Bodit, however, furrowed his brows and slowly said, The situation is a bit special. If the people who secretly gave the Stygian Club's members laxatives are not from the Allied forces, then this matter is too strange. I suggest that we don't act rashly and wait for the battle to settle down before we directly act. Wu Jie, who was also known as the Wisdom War Elder, nodded without hesitation. We only need to surround the Stygian Club's encampment and wait for both sides to suffer. Then we'll clean up the mess. Everyone, Get moving and pay attention to the attack signal. We'll immediately act as soon as we find it. Time passed by bit. After half an hour of fierce fighting, be it the Stygian Club or the joint forces of more than a dozen forces, all of them had paid a very heavy price. Among them, the burly black man was hit by a werewolf and suffered serious injuries. It was under such circumstances that the Alliance members began to feel fear and were ready to find an opportunity to slip away. Stop them and activate the array. Seeing that the enemy was gradually losing, Keithmore didn't hesitate to issue the order with intense killing intent. As the 4 vampire counts attacked one after another, the array was activated and the blood poison was released. Shrill screams came out of the Allied forces' experts' mouths. Moreover, after this shrill scream, more screams started to ring out one after another. Break the array and kill the enemy. One of the Caucasian leaders roared as he dashed towards a vampire count. However, the vampire count killed the Caucasian leader with a single strike. A few of the Caucasian men around him, who had been firing their guns at the Caucasian leader, were killed by the blood poison. A life for a life. A skinny, dark-skinned young man in the Alliance army had his back torn open by a werewolf's sharp claws. The moment blood flowed out, he suddenly stuck his fingers into his eye sockets and forcefully gouged out his eyeballs. As blood gushed out, he let out a shrill, blood-curdling scream. A cloud of black smoke that was as black as ink spread from his body, forming a black fog tornado like a hurricane. A large amount of blood splattered beside the corpses on the ground, but at this moment, the blood seemed to have been summoned by something and quickly flowed toward him before finally fusing with the black fog tornado. Boom! In just a few breaths, a tens of meters tall black fog tornado was formed. The moment the skinny young man's body exploded, a mushroom cloud resembling a nuclear bomb exploded and instantly turned several Stygian Club werewolves and vampires into a bloody mist, while 7 to 8 Allied forces were also killed in an instant. On the ground, the blood array was broken and the blood poison dispersed. The crazy killing continued, and the Stygian Club's members eventually retreated amidst sharp roars as their losses increased. They originally had 50 to 60 people, but only less than 20 of them were left after the retreat. The Allied forces were even more miserable. Less than 200 people survived out of the nearly 600 people, and more than half of them were badly wounded. In the northwest direction, Tan Xiao stood at the edge of the concealment array and looked at the tragic scene below. His heart was as calm as still water. The killing scene in front of him was common and not surprising at all. However, Mo and the others, including the ruthless Jinlei Duomo, had a slight change in expression. They were all ruthless characters with hands stained with blood. Many of them had climbed out of the pile of corpses many times. But most of the battles they had in the past relied on firearms. It was far from the excitement of close combat where flesh and blood splattered everywhere. "Boss, are we going to act?" Mo glanced at Tan Xiao and asked in a low voice. He was secretly surprised by Tan Xiao's calmness. He really couldn't figure out whether Tan Xiao was too ruthless or what he had experienced in the past. Tan Xiao shook his head indifferently and said, "The most important protagonist of today hasn't appeared yet. What's the point of us acting now? Don't worry. Let's wait and see. I'm sure the scene will be more exciting after the protagonist appears." Mo's expression moved and he hesitantly asked, "You mean the pyramid?" "Speaking of which, the pyramid is the largest organization in the world," said Tang Xiao with a smile. "The Stygian Club is at best an amalgamation of various forces, but the pyramid is different. It's a whole entity and has a very good operation, be it in the face of enemies or development. Just wait and see. The pyramid's wisdom war elder will probably thank us for the arrangement." But Mo was confused and asked, "The sandpiper and the clam fight and the fisherman benefits," said Tan Xiao indifferently. "Don't tell me he doesn't thank us for our painstaking arrangement?" Mo suddenly understood and chuckled. "Boss, I don't think it's appropriate to describe it as the sandpiper and the clam fight and the fisherman benefits. It's better to describe it as the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Because behind the oriole, there's still the hunter. We're the final winner, the hunter. How could there be so many twists and turns? Tan Xiao couldn't help but laugh. The protagonist is coming. Mo and the others' expressions shifted and they quickly looked towards the distance. From the southeast, 50 to 60 figures flickered lightning fast toward the coalition forces of various forces. Some of them even chased after the Stygian Club's retreat. Just as the Stygian Club's 5 vampires and 3 or 4 wingmen were flying in the air and were about to retreat to the top of the mountain in the north, a series of gunshots accompanied by bullets were heard, blocking their escape route. Stay. 3 old men exuding surging auras led more than a dozen able-bodied ability users to soar from behind the hilltop. They unleashed their special abilities, causing lightning to wreak havoc and hurricanes to appear out of nowhere. Water dragons bared their fangs and brandished their claws, while sharp metal blades blotted out the sky. Fire. The air was as though a prairie fire was burning crazily. A deep and dignified voice sounded as several wingmen were shrouded in raging flames. The vampires were nearly roasted by the fire as they crazily fell down. The War Elder of Wisdom, Wu Jie, wielded a golden scepter and stepped on a fiery cloud as he instantly swept past 2 vampire counts. It looked like a casual strike, but the 2 vampire counts were directly killed. You fucking bastard, Wu Jie. Keith Moore's figure finally shot over from afar. His billowing voice was deafening and contained boundless anger. A thin old man next to the War Elder of Wisdom burst into laughter. You're the one who deserves to die, Keith Moore. I didn't kill you back then, but I won't show you any mercy today. Hurricane Myriad / You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.